They thought I was just a stray at their table, a cheap ornament for the Palm Beach elite. But the moment he called me trash, I saw the weakness in his empire as clearly as the balance sheet under the chandelier. When you insult the wrong person, you do not just lose face, you lose power. Want to know how one insult became a hostile takeover? Pull up a chair. We are sitting at the exact same table. My name is Ren Stone, and strictly speaking, I should not have been at that table. The invitation had been printed on cardstock thick enough to cut skin, embossed with the Ashford family crest, a lion holding a shield that looked more like a warning than a welcome. This was Palm Beach in late November, where the air held a humidity that felt like a warm hand pressing against your throat, and where the silence of the wealthy was louder than any shout. I sat with my back straight, my hands folded in my lap, observing the ecosystem around me. The dining room of the Ashford estate was a cavern of mahogany and gold leaf, illuminated by a chandelier that likely cost more than the house I grew up in. Around the table sat 20 people who controlled a significant portion of the national grid, a few senators, and a media tycoon whose newspapers were currently resting on coffee tables across the eastern seaboard. They were discussing tax loopholes and yacht moorings in the Mediterranean, with the casual boredom of people discussing the weather. I was 34 years old. I ran a company that was quietly revolutionizing energy storage. I had patents to my name that were cited in engineering textbooks, but in this room, none of that mattered. In this room, I was simply the woman Caleb Ashford had brought home, an anomaly in a lineage that prided itself on purity. I wore a black dress. It was minimalist, structured, and architectural. It had no sequins, no lace, no desperate attempt to signal affluence. It was a choice that screamed neutrality. I was not trying to blend in. I was trying to disappear, to simply survive the evening for Caleb's sake. Caleb sat to my right. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, the classic Ashford jawline sharp in the candlelight, but I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from a paved road. He kept checking his watch. He kept glancing at the head of the table. He knew his father better than I did, and he knew that Barton Ashford did not host dinners just to feed people. Barton hosted dinners to remind everyone who was feeding them. Barton sat at the head of the table, a man carved from granite and old prejudices. He was 60 years old, but looked timeless in that vampiric, preserved way of the ultra-rich. He had not spoken to me directly since I arrived. He had looked through me, as if I were a smudge on a window pane that the cleaning staff had missed. The servers, moving with the silent efficiency of ghosts, cleared the second course. The clinking of silver against china faded. The conversation lulled. This was the moment, the toast. Barton stood up. He held a crystal flute of champagne, the bubbles rising in a frantic, golden line. He waited. He knew how to command a room. He waited until the senator stopped chewing, until the media tycoon put down his fork, until the silence was absolute. "To family," Barton said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the chest. "And to the legacy we protect." The guests murmured their agreement. "To legacy." Barton did not sit down. He turned his gaze. It was a physical weight, moving down the length of the long table, bypassing the politicians, bypassing the investors, until it landed squarely on me. He smiled. It was a terrifying expression, devoid of any warmth, a baring of teeth that mimicked a smile but signaled a threat. "We have always been careful about what we bring into this house," Barton continued, his tone conversational, almost pleasant. "We curate our art. We curate our investments. We curate our company." Caleb shifted in his chair. I heard the fabric of his jacket rustle. "However," Barton said, and he took a slow sip of his champagne, savoring the suspense. "It seems my son has forgotten that curation extends to the company he keeps. There is a certain standard, a certain texture to the Ashford name. It is refined. It is durable." The room went cold. The air conditioning seemed to drop 10 degrees in a single second. Barton looked directly into my eyes. "And you, Miss Stone, are a disruption to that texture. I have tolerated your presence for the sake of politeness. But let us be clear. You do not bring value to this table. You bring dilution. I did not blink. I did not look away. My heart rate kicked up, a biological response to a predator, but my face remained a mask of calm. One does not park a sedan in a showroom of Ferraris and call it a collection, Barton said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to every corner of the room. One calls it a mistake. Please, in the future, do not bring trash to my table. It ruins the appetite. The word hung in the air. Trash. It was not a curse word. It was worse. It was a classification. It was a disposal instruction. The reaction in the room was instant and absolute paralysis. Forks froze halfway to mouths. A woman across from me, the wife of a hedge fund manager, looked down at her plate as if counting the peas. The silence was suffocating. It was a vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of my lungs. I waited. I waited for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I was waiting for Caleb. I was waiting for the man I was going to marry to stand up. I was waiting for the sound of a chair scraping back, for a voice raised in anger, for a defense. She is not trash. She is the most brilliant woman I know. She is my future. But there was nothing. I looked at Caleb. His face was pale, his eyes wide and fixed on his father. He was terrified. He was a 30-year-old man who had reverted to a 6-year-old boy in the presence of a tyrant. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was calculating the cost of intervention, the trust fund, the board seat, the inheritance, and in that hesitation, in that pause that stretched just a heartbeat too long, he broke us. That silence hurt more than the word his father had used. The insult was just noise. The silence was betrayal. I took a deep breath. The adrenaline was flooding my system now, sharpening my vision. I saw the pores on Barton's nose. I saw the dust motes dancing in the light. I saw the balance of power in the room shift, not toward him, but away from me, leaving me isolated on an island of humiliation. But I was not a victim. I was a scientist. I dealt in facts, in verifiable data, in structural integrity. And I realized, looking at Barton Ashford, that his structural integrity was compromised. A man who needs to humiliate a guest to feel powerful is a man who is secretly terrified of losing control. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw my wine in his face, although the cinematic urge was there. I picked up my linen napkin. I folded it. Once, twice, I laid it on the table, to the left of my plate, aligning the edge perfectly with the silverware. The movement was so deliberate, so calm, that it drew every eye in the room. I stood up. My chair did not scrape. I lifted it slightly as I pushed it back. I looked at Barton. I did not glare. I looked at him with the clinical detachment of a biologist examining a specimen under a microscope. Barton, I said. My voice was steady. It was not loud, but in the tomb-like silence of the room, it carried clearly. You spend so much time sitting at the head of the table, looking down at everyone, that you have lost your sense of perspective. Barton's smirk faltered. Just a fraction of an inch. He had expected tears. He had expected a scene. He had not expected analysis. You think you are a giant? I continued. But from where I am standing, you look incredibly small. Enjoy your dinner. I turned. I did not run. I walked, one foot in front of the other, heel to toe, a measured cadence. I could feel their eyes on my back, burning holes in my black dress. I walked past the servers who were staring at the floor. I walked through the double doors, into the foyer with its marble floors and towering floral arrangements. I walked out the front door and into the humid night air of Florida. The valet was there, standing by the booth. He looked up, surprised to see a guest leaving before the salad course was finished. My car, please, I said. The gray sedan. He nodded, scrambling for the keys. Behind me, the heavy front door opened. Footsteps slapped against the pavement, hurried and frantic. Ren, wait! It was Caleb. I did not stop walking, but I slowed down. I stood by the fountain in the center of the driveway, the water gurgling cheerfully, indifferent to the wreckage of my evening. Caleb caught up to me. He was breathless, his bow tie slightly askew. He reached for my arm, but I stepped back, a small step, a clear boundary. "Ren, please," he said, his voice shaking. "I am so sorry. I didn't know he was going to do that. You know how he is. He drinks too much scotch. He gets mean. He likes to test people." He called me trash. "Caleb," I said. "I know," Caleb pleaded. "I know it was awful, but you have to understand. He's old school. He's stuck in his ways. I'll talk to him. I'll go back in there right now, and I will explain that he crossed a line. I will fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a good man in a vacuum, but in the atmosphere of his father, he crumpled. He thought this was a social faux pas. He thought this was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with an apology and a bouquet of flowers tomorrow morning. "You can't fix this," I said. "I can," he insisted. "I will make him apologize. I will make him see he was wrong." "No, Caleb," I said. The realization was cold and hard, like a stone in my stomach. "You are talking about repairing a relationship. I am talking about the man himself. That kind of rot? That kind of entitlement?" I shook my head. "That item cannot be fixed," I said. "It can only be replaced." Caleb looked confused. "What does that mean? Replaced?" "Ren, you're upset. You're in shock. Just don't drive. Let me call a driver. Let me come with you." "Go back inside," I said. "Eat your dinner. Save your inheritance." The valet pulled my car up. It was a sensible, 4-year-old sedan, sitting amidst a lineup of Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Aston Martins. It looked like a mistake. It looked like the punchline to Barton's joke, but as I opened the door, it felt like a tank. It was mine. I had paid for it with money I earned, not money I was given. "Ren!" Caleb called out as I slid into the driver's seat. I closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the most satisfying sound I had heard all night. It was the sound of an airlock sealing. I started the engine. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. The adrenaline was no longer a hum. It was a roar in my ears. The humiliation was starting to burn now. The shock wearing off, replaced by a hot, sharp anger. Trash. He had dismissed my entire existence, my struggle, my intelligence, with a single word. I drove down the long, winding driveway, past the manicured hedges and the security cameras. I turned onto the main road, the ocean visible through the gaps in the palm trees, a dark, churning void under the moon. My phone, resting on the passenger seat, buzzed. I glanced at it. It was Maya Rios, my operations assistant. It was 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday. Maya never called on Saturday nights unless the building was on fire. I pressed the speaker button on the dashboard. "Maya," I said, my voice sounding rough, even to my own ears. "Tell me the lab didn't explode." "Ren?" Maya's voice was tight, anxious. "Where are you? Are you alone?" "I am leaving the Ashford estate," I said. "I am alone. What is it?" "Check your secure email," Maya said. "But don't crash the car when you read it. Just tell me." "Maya." "Okay." Maya took a breath. "We just got a formal communication from the legal team at Ashford Horizon Energy. It came through 10 minutes ago, flagged as high priority. Ashford Horizon Energy, Barton's company, the massive utility conglomerate that powered half the state and generated the billions that paid for the chandelier I had just sat under. "What do they want?" I asked. "We aren't due to start the preliminary talks for the licensing deal until next month." "They don't want to wait until next month," Maya said. "They are pushing hard. They sent over a term sheet. They want to accelerate the strategic partnership. They are demanding a meeting first thing Monday morning to sign a binding letter of intent." I frowned, my eyes fixed on the road. "Monday? That is in 36 hours. Why the rush? Large utilities move at the speed of glaciers. They never accelerate." "That is what I thought," Maya said. So I did some digging. I looked at the metadata on the files they sent, and I cross-referenced it with some market chatter on the private forums. And? Ren, they are desperate, Maya said. The tone of the email isn't a request. It is a demand disguised as an opportunity. They need our storage tech. Specifically, they need the density numbers from your new solid-state battery prototype to validate their next quarter guidance. If they don't have a signed partnership with a tech innovator by the end of the week, they are going to miss their sustainability covenants. I slowed the car down. The pieces slammed together in my mind. Barton Ashford had just sat at his table, surrounded by his sycophants, and called me trash. He had humiliated me for sport. He had dismissed me as a disruption, a peasant at the court of the king. But he didn't know. He didn't know that the tech innovator his company was desperately trying to bed was Lumenvale Systems. He didn't know that Lumenvale Systems was owned, founded, and controlled by a holding company called Helix Ventures. And he certainly didn't know that Helix Ventures was 100% owned by Ren Stone. I had kept my name off the front door. I had used lawyers and proxies to negotiate the early stages, because I wanted the technology to stand on its own, without the shadow of my relationship with Caleb clouding the valuation. I wanted to be taken seriously. Now, that anonymity was a weapon. Maya, I said. My voice was no longer shaking. The anger that had been burning me alive a moment ago cooled instantly, crystallizing into something sharp and deadly. How much cash do they have on hand? Not enough, Maya replied, and their debt wall is closer than the public reports say. If they don't get this deal, their stock takes a hit. If their stock takes a hit, Barton's leverage ratios blow up. I finished the sentence. I looked in the rearview mirror. The lights of the Ashford estate were fading into the distance, just a glow in the trees. He thought I was nothing. He thought he could discard me. But he had just handed me the keys to his destruction, and he didn't even know it. Maya, I said, don't reply to the email. Do not confirm the meeting for Monday. What? Maya sounded confused. But this is the deal we wanted. This puts Lumenvale on the map. We are going to get the deal, I said, but not on their timeline, and definitely not on their terms. I turned the steering wheel, merging onto the highway that led back to the city, away from the island of billionaires. Get the legal team up, I said. Wake them up if you have to. I want a full forensic analysis of Ashford Horizon's debt structure on my desk by tomorrow morning. Every bond, every loan, every covenant. Ren, what are you doing? Maya asked. Barton Ashford wants to play games, I said. He thinks he is the only one who knows the rules, but he forgot the first rule of business, which is, check who is sitting across the table before you flip it over. I hung up the phone. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time all night, I could see perfectly clearly I wasn't going to fix his son. I wasn't going to fix his manners. I was going to buy his company, and then I was going to fire him. The highway stretching out before me was a ribbon of gray asphalt under the amber glow of the streetlights. My hands had stopped shaking, but my grip on the steering wheel remained iron tight. My knuckles pale against the leather. The air inside the car felt pressurized, thick with the phantom echoes of the dinner party I had just escaped. Trash. The word was still bouncing around my skull, ricocheting off the walls of my mind. But it was no longer hurting me. It was fueling me. Maya's voice came through the car speakers again, sharp and clear, cutting through the static in my head. She was reading the email from the Ashford Horizon legal team verbatim. To the attention of the Lumenvale Negotiation Committee, Maya read, her tone flattening into that special cadence people reserve for reading corporate lies. Due to unforeseen scheduling conflicts with our board of directors, and in the interest of maximizing fiscal synergies for the upcoming quarter, we find it imperative to accelerate the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding. We propose a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday. At our headquarters, we anticipate a swift execution of terms. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Fiscal synergies, I repeated. That is the most expensive way I have ever heard someone say they are broke. I glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was 8:15 in the evening. Maya, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. Skip the fluff. Look at the attached preliminary disclosures. I know they sent a teaser file to entice us. Look at the debt maturity schedule. How many weeks do they have? There was a pause on the line. I could hear the furious clicking of Maya's keyboard. She was good. I had hired her 3 years ago from a hedge fund because she understood that what companies said was rarely as important as what they didn't say. Ren, Maya said, and her voice had dropped an octave. It is not weeks. It is days. I changed lanes, bypassing a slow-moving truck. Be specific. They have a tranche of senior secured notes maturing on the 15th of next month, Maya explained. That is roughly 3 weeks from now. But there is a covenant attached to their revolving credit facility. If their stock price dips below $40 a share for 3 consecutive trading days, the banks can call in the loans immediately. They closed on Friday at $41.50. They are walking a tightrope, I murmured. It gets worse, Maya continued. I am looking at their cash flow statement from the last quarter. The operational costs are up 20%, but revenue is flat. They are burning cash to keep the lights on, quite literally. If they don't announce a game-changing partnership, something that promises high-tech, future-proof revenue, by Monday or Tuesday, the market is going to smell blood. The stock will tank. The banks will call the loans. Barton Ashford loses his empire. I stared at the road, the red taillights of the cars ahead blurring into streaks of crimson. It was almost poetic. The man who had sat at the head of a mahogany table, treating me like a contagion he wanted to scrub from his life, was actually a desperate beggar in a tuxedo. He needed me. He needed Lumenvale Systems. But he didn't know it was me. That was the irony that tasted sweeter than the champagne I had left untouched. When I founded Lumenvale 5 years ago, I had made a calculated decision. I knew how this world worked. I knew that a female founder in the heavy industrial energy sector would be second-guessed, lowballed, and patronized. If they knew I was 29 years old at the time, without a famous last name, they would have tried to buy me out for pennies. So I had built a fortress of anonymity. I created a holding company, Helix Ventures, to act as the legal owner of Lumenvale. I hired a team of gray-haired, serious-looking men to sit in the initial meetings. I let the industry assume Lumenvale was a spin-off from some established tech giant or a project run by a reclusive genius engineer who hated boardrooms. I was the reclusive genius, but I didn't hate boardrooms. I just hated the people who usually sat in them. My mind flashed back to 7 years ago. I was 27, working as a junior researcher at the Harborline Applied Sciences Center. It was a prestigious institute, the kind of place where the letterhead alone could get you a grant. I had spent 6 months developing a new electrolyte compound for lithium-ion batteries. It was stable, cheap, and efficient. I remembered the day I presented it to the department head. A man named Dr. Sterling. He had looked at my data, then at me. I was wearing a suit I had bought at a discount store, and my shoes were scuffed. I didn't look like the other researchers who came from money, who had parents on the board of trustees. It is promising, Ren, he had said, tossing my report onto a pile of papers. But we are going to have Dr. Kensington lead the publication. We need a name with weight on this. You understand, don't you? You can be listed as a contributing assistant. Contributing assistant, I had done the work. I had solved the equation. But I didn't have the pedigree. I remembered walking out of his office, burning with a cold. Silent rage. I didn't cry then, either. I went back to my small apartment, ate instant noodles for dinner, and made a vow to the peeling paint on my ceiling. I would never again let a man with a legacy last name take credit for my mind. I would never kneel to a dynasty. I would build my own. And I would build it out of reinforced concrete and intellectual property that they couldn't touch. The phone buzzed again, interrupting the memory. It wasn't Maya this time. It was Caleb. The text message flashed on the car's display screen. Caleb, I am talking to him now. He is stubborn, but I will make him see reason. I will make him apologize to you. Ren, please answer me. I felt a surge of exhaustion. Caleb thought the problem was an apology. He thought that if Barton mumbled, "I am sorry," over a scotch, everything would return to equilibrium. He didn't understand that an apology from a man like Barton Ashford was just a tactical lie. I tapped the voice command button on the steering wheel. Reply to Caleb. Go ahead, the robotic voice of the car assistant prompted. No apology needed, I dictated, my voice hard. Consequences needed. Message sent, the car replied. I didn't want his words. I wanted his leverage. Maya, I said, bringing her back on the line. Are you still there? I am here, she said. I am already pulling the files. Good. Listen to me carefully. I want you to wake up the entire deal team. Call Dahlia Mercer at her home. I don't care if she is at a gala or asleep. Tell her we are activating the war room. Tonight? Maya asked. Tonight, I confirmed. I want a full forensic audit of every debt instrument Ashford Horizon has issued in the last 10 years. I want to know who holds their bonds. I want to know which banks manage their credit lines. And I want to know exactly what personal assets Barton has pledged as collateral. You think he is leveraged personally? Men like Barton always are, I said. They believe their own hype. He thinks he is too big to fail. So he bets the house. Find out where he is exposed. And the meeting on Monday? Maya asked. Do we cancel? I turned the car onto the exit ramp that led to my neighborhood. The skyline of the city rose up before me, a grid of light against the black sky. It looked like a circuit board. No, I said. Canceling is emotional. It looks like we are running away. We don't cancel. We pause. Pause? Send a response to their legal team, I instructed. Draft it now. Use the coldest, most bureaucratic language you can find. Tell them that upon review of their accelerated timeline, the board of Lumenvale, that is me, has decided to suspend all negotiation activities pending a deeper due diligence review. Cite concerns regarding long-term fiscal stability and inconsistencies in provided data. Maya gasped softly. Ren, that is a declaration of war. If we send that letter, and it leaks, their stock will open down 10% on Monday. It kills the confidence. Exactly, I said. He wanted to treat me like a liability. I will show him what a liability looks like. Send the letter. And Maya, sign it on behalf of Helix Ventures. Do not put my name on it yet. Let him wonder who the faceless entity is that just put a knife to his throat. Understood, Maya said, her voice sharpening with professional excitement. I will have the team assembled at your place in an hour. Make it 45 minutes, I said. I pulled into the underground garage of my building. It was a modern high-rise, steel and glass, overlooking the bay. I parked my gray sedan in my assigned spot. It looked unassuming, just like me, but the engine block was pristine, and the brakes were ceramic. I took the elevator up to the penthouse. I didn't turn on the main lights when I entered. I walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. The view was magnificent. Thousands of lights, millions of dollars of energy flowing through the grid, powering lives, businesses, and secrets. Somewhere out there, in one of the older, statelier districts, Barton Ashford was probably swirling a glass of cognac, telling his guests that he had handled the situation with his son's fiancée. He was probably laughing about it. He thought the dinner was over. I kicked off my heels. I unzipped the black dress and let it fall to the floor. Stepping out of it like I was shedding a skin, I walked to my closet and pulled out a fresh outfit. Not a dress this time. A pair of tailored trousers, a silk blouse, and a blazer that looked like armor. I walked back to the window. I could see my reflection in the glass, superimposed over the city lights. I didn't look like the woman who had sat silently at the table while a billionaire called her trash. I looked like the woman who owned the patent that was about to make his technology obsolete. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from Maya. Letter sent. Team inbound. I poured myself a glass of water. I didn't need alcohol. I needed clarity. Barton Ashford had made a fatal error. He assumed that power was static, that it resided in old names and old money. He didn't understand that power in the modern world was fluid. It moved. It belonged to the people who controlled the flow of information and the flow of energy. I took a sip of water and watched the city breathe. "If they want to play the dinner table," I said to the empty room, my voice low and final, "then I will play the boardroom." I turned away from the window and walked toward my home office. Turning on the lights, the desk was large, clean, and ready. It was time to go to work. The dinner party was finished. The acquisition had just begun. The digital clock on my wall read 3 a.m. My penthouse had ceased to be a home about 4 hours ago. It was now a war room. The floor-to-ceiling windows, usually offering a serene view of the city skyline, were now reflecting the blue light of 6 different monitors set up on my dining table. Maya Rios was pacing the length of the living room, a tablet in one hand and a phone pressed to her ear. 2 junior analysts, whom she had summoned from their beds with the promise of triple overtime and a non-disclosure agreement that threatened their firstborns, were hunched over their laptops, typing furiously. The air smelled of espresso and ozone. I stood by the kitchen island, studying a printed organizational chart of Ashford Horizon Energy. It looked like a family tree, but instead of bloodlines, it mapped the flow of liability. It was a mess. It was a deliberate labyrinth designed to confuse regulators and hide the rot at the center. "Got it," one of the analysts said. His name was David, a forensic accountant who looked like he hadn't seen the sun in a decade. "I found the covenant." I walked over to him, leaning over his shoulder. "Show me." David pointed to a paragraph buried in the footnotes of a bond prospectus issued 5 years ago. "Here, it is a change of control provision. Standard stuff. But look at the trigger condition for the debt acceleration." I read the text. It was dense legalese, but translated into plain English. It was a landmine. "If the consolidated debt-to-equity ratio exceeds 4-to-1 for 2 consecutive quarters," I read aloud, "or if the market capitalization of the primary entity falls below $2 billion, the bondholders have the right to demand immediate repayment of the principal." "Exactly," David said, tapping the screen. "And right now, their market cap is sitting at $2.1 billion. They are hovering right on the edge of the cliff. If the stock drops even 5% on Monday, they breach the covenant. The bondholders can call in $500 million of debt instantly." "They don't have $500 million, Maya said. "Joining us." She tossed her phone onto the sofa. "I just got off the phone with a contact at their primary lender. Barton Ashford has been sweeping the cash accounts every Friday to make payroll. The company is running on fumes." I straightened up, crossing my arms. "So, he is not just bullying me. He is trying to get me to pay his credit card bill." "It gets worse," Maya said. Her expression was grim. "There is a rumor circulating on the private equity channels. It is about Barton's personal holding company." "The family trust?" I asked. "No," Maya corrected. "His personal investment vehicle, the one he uses to fund his yachts, his political donations, and that ridiculous estate in Palm Beach. The rumor is that he has pledged his personal shares in Ashford Horizon as collateral for a massive personal margin loan." I felt a cold smile touch my lips. This was the piece of the puzzle I had been missing. "He is leveraged," I whispered. "He is betting on his own stock to fund his lifestyle." "If the share price drops," Maya explained, "the bank issues a margin call. Barton has to put up more cash, which he doesn't have, or the bank sells his shares to cover the loan. If they sell his shares, he loses his voting majority, and if he loses his voting majority," I finished, "he is vulnerable." This was not just business anymore. This was anatomy. I had found the artery. "Okay," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the room. "Here is the play. We are not going to wait for the stock to drop. We are going to help gravity do its job." I turned to David. "Find out who holds those bonds, the ones with the acceleration clause. I don't care if it is pension funds, insurance companies, or grandmothers in Idaho. I want a list. And then, David asked. And then we buy them, I said. David blinked. All of them? As many as we can get our hands on without triggering a disclosure requirement yet, I instructed. Use the Helix Ventures Capital Reserve. Use the secondary funds. Buy them quietly. I want to own the debt that holds a gun to Barton's head. Maya was already typing. I will route the orders through our brokers in London and Singapore. We can pick up about 15% of the issuance before the market opens in New York. It will look like standard volume. Do it, I said. But keep the price stable. Do not spook the herd. We want to be the invisible hand. I walked back to the window. The city was still dark, but the first hint of gray was touching the horizon. I needed more than just financial leverage. I needed a surgeon. Maya, I said without turning around. Get me Dahlia Mercer. Maya paused. Dahlia Mercer? The velvet guillotine? That is the one. She is expensive. Ren. And she doesn't take clients she doesn't like. She will like this, I said. Call her. Dahlia Mercer did not come to my penthouse. She insisted on meeting at a private hangar at the executive airport at 6 a.m, where she was preparing to fly to Tokyo for a merger. She was a woman of indeterminate age, wearing a white suit that looked like it would repel dirt by sheer force of will. She sat in the lounge of the FBO, sipping hot water with lemon. I sat across from her. I had not slept, but I was running on pure, cold adrenaline. Ren Stone, Dahlia said, her voice smooth and dangerous. I have heard of you. You are the one who solved the thermal runaway problem for grid storage. I am, I said. And now you want to solve a problem named Barton Ashford. She noted. She didn't ask. She stated, Dahlia Mercer knew everything. I placed a single folder on the table between us. He insulted me. That is personal. He is running a public company into the ground while leveraging his own equity to stay afloat. That is professional. I want to remove him. Dahlia opened the folder. She scanned the pages with eyes that moved like lasers. She saw the debt analysis, the margin loan intel, and the breakdown of the board members. You can't fire him for being rude, Dahlia said, closing the folder. The law doesn't care about your feelings, and neither does the SEC. If you attack him because he called you a name, he will sue you for tortious interference and he will win. He will paint you as a hysterical woman scorned. I know, I said. I don't want to sue him for emotional distress. I want to remove him for cause. Dahlia nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. Good. Then we need to look at the bylaws. Specifically, the fitness to serve clause. She pulled a tablet from her bag and tapped the screen. Ashford Horizon has a standard corporate governance charter. It states that the CEO can be removed by a majority vote of the board if he acts in a way that causes material reputational damage to the firm or demonstrates gross fiscal negligence. He is cooking the books to hide the debt, I said. We suspect he is inflating revenue projections. Suspecting is not enough, Dahlia countered. You need proof. Hard, undeniable proof. But even with proof, you have a problem. The board is packed with his cronies, old money, golf buddies. They won't vote against him unless they have a gun to their heads. I am buying the bonds, I said. I will be his biggest creditor by Tuesday. Dahlia smiled. It was a terrifying sight. That is a good start. Creditors have rights that shareholders don't. If he breaches that covenant, you can force an involuntary bankruptcy petition. That gives you the right to demand a restructuring plan. And step 1 of that plan can be the removal of current management. That is the nuclear option, I said. I want something cleaner. I want him to sign his own resignation. Then you need to corner him, Dahlia said. You need to make staying in power more expensive than leaving. But be warned. Ren, Barton is an old animal. He will bite. Do you know what his next move will be? He will go to the press, I predicted. He will try to destroy my credibility before I can destroy his balance sheet. Precisely, Dahlia said. He will spin a narrative. He will say you are a gold digger who seduced his son to get near the family fortune. He will say you are a corporate spy. He will say you are unstable. He will use every misogynistic trope in the book because they work. Let him try, I said. He will do more than try, Dahlia warned. He has a PR machine that has buried senators. Are you ready for your name to be dragged through the mud? I reached into my bag and pulled out a second folder. I slid it across the table. This is a list of my patents, I said. This is a certified audit of my personal net worth, independent of Caleb. This is a record of every dollar I have donated to charity in the last 5 years. And this, I pointed to the last document, is a breakdown of the initial capital I put into Lumenvale. It was my money, every cent. Dahlia looked at the documents. You are prepared. I am not a gold digger, I said calmly. I am the gold mine. If he calls me a fraud, I will publish my tax returns. If he calls me poor, I will buy his country club. If he says I am riding his coattails, I will show the world that his coattails are made of cheap polyester and debt. Dahlia laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. I like you. Wren, you don't want a lawsuit. You want an execution. I want a correction, I said. The market is inefficient. Barton Ashford is an inefficiency. Dahlia tapped the table. There is one more thing, a variable you might not have seen. She turned her tablet around to face me. It displayed a list of institutional shareholders for Ashford Horizon. Look at line 4, Dahlia said. I looked. Sterling Point Capital. They owned 4% of the stock. I know them, I said. They are an activist fund. Aggressive. They specialize in shaking up stagnant boards. They have been trying to get a meeting with Barton for 6 months, Dahlia said. He has been stonewalling them. They are furious. They are sitting there, waiting for a catalyst. They want him out, but they don't have enough votes yet. My mind raced. 4% wasn't enough to control the board, but it was enough to make noise. If I could align with them, if I launch a tender offer, I said, thinking aloud, and I present a plan that actually unlocks value, selling the dead assets, pivoting to renewables, Sterling Point will back me. They will carry you on their shoulders, Dahlia agreed. But you cannot coordinate with them legally before you launch. That is collusion. You have to signal them. You have to put a proposal on the table that is so obviously in their interest that they have no choice but to join you. I can do that, I said. The intercom in the lounge chimed. Ms. Mercer, your flight is ready for boarding. Dahlia stood up. She smoothed her white suit. I will take the case, she said. I will have my associates draft the engagement letter. We will structure the bond acquisition through a special purpose vehicle to keep your name off it for another 48 hours. That gives you time to set the trap. She looked at me, her eyes serious. One piece of advice. Wren, she said, when you go after a man like this, you have to be willing to burn the bridge while you are still standing on it. Are you sure you are ready to destroy your fiancé's family? I thought of Caleb. I thought of his silence at the table. I thought of the way he had looked at his father with fear instead of loyalty to me. Caleb made his choice, I said. He chose the legacy. I am just testing the structural integrity of that legacy. Very well, Dahlia said. She picked up her bag. We will lock the road. You just drive the tank. She walked toward the tarmac, leaving me alone in the lounge. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the airport. My phone buzzed. It was Maya. Maya. The bond purchases are executing. We have cleared $5 million in face value already. No price movement yet. I typed a reply. Keep going. Buy until the liquidity dries up. I stood up and walked to the window, watching Dahlia's jet taxi down the runway. The sun was fully up now, a harsh, revealing light. Barton Ashford was probably waking up in his silk sheets, thinking about his golf game. He was probably thinking about how he would spin the story of the rude girl to his friends at the club. He thought he was the protagonist of this story. He was wrong. I wasn't going to scream at him. I wasn't going to throw a drink in his face. Those were the actions of a person who wanted attention. I didn't want attention. I wanted results. I picked up the folder containing the debt covenants. I ran my finger over the signature line where Barton had signed his name 5 years ago, pledging the company's future against a loan he couldn't repay. I don't want to win by noise, I said to the empty room, echoing the promise I had made to myself in the car. I want to win by signature. I walked out of the airport and into the morning, ready to buy a billion-dollar company just to prove a point. Monday morning in Austin, Texas, brought a sky so blue it looked like a computer screensaver. Hard and bright and limitless. The headquarters of Lumenvale Systems was a structure of glass and white steel, designed to look less like an office building and more like a processor chip dropped into the middle of the hill country. It was silent, efficient, and intimidating. I was standing in the observation bay on the 3rd floor, watching the lobby through the security feed. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. "He is here," Maya said. She was standing next to me, holding a tablet like a shield. "And he is already yelling," on the screen. Barton Ashford was making an entrance. He was flanked by 2 nervous-looking junior associates from his legal team, both carrying briefcases that looked too heavy for them. Barton, however, carried nothing but his own ego. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than the security guard's annual salary, and he was currently pointing a finger at that very guard. I pressed the button to unmute the audio feed. "I do not care about your visitor badge policy," Barton's voice crackled through the speakers, tinny but unmistakable. "I am Barton Ashford. I am here to see the CEO of Helix Ventures. We have a scheduled meeting. Now open this gate before I have your supervisor fire you for incompetence." The guard, a stoic former Marine named Elias, didn't flinch. "I understand, sir, but everyone signs in. It is protocol." "Protocol is for employees," Barton snapped. "I'm a strategic partner. Get the CEO down here, now." I watched as Elias calmly picked up the phone. He wasn't calling the CEO. He was calling Maya. "Let him up," I said to Maya. "But put him in conference room B." Maya smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "Room B, the fishbowl." "Exactly," I said. "Turn the privacy tint off on the glass walls and set the overhead lighting to 100%. No warm tones, pure white light." "He is going to hate that," Maya said. "It highlights every wrinkle." "I know," I replied. "And make him wait 10 minutes. Not long enough to leave, but long enough to sweat." I watched as Maya headed down to collect him. I smoothed the front of my white blouse. I was not wearing a suit today. I was wearing tailored trousers and a simple silk top, the kind of outfit that said I didn't need to dress up to be in charge. I wore no jewelry, no engagement ring. My hands were bare. 10 minutes later, I walked down the hallway toward conference room B. The room was designed for interrogation. Though we called it transparency, it was a glass box in the center of the floor, visible to the entire open-plan office. The lighting was harsh, designed for examining intricate circuit schematics, not for flattering aging billionaires. I could see Barton inside. He was pacing. He was checking his watch. He looked agitated, like a tiger trapped in a pet shop. He was used to wood-paneled boardrooms with soft lighting and leather chairs, places where shadows could hide the truth. Here, there were no shadows. I pushed the door open. It slid back on silent magnetic rails. I walked in. I carried no notebook, no laptop, no legal team. I walked in with my hands empty and my chin up. Barton turned around, ready to unleash a torrent of abuse at whoever dared to keep him waiting. When he saw me, his mouth hung open for a fraction of a second, and then it snapped shut into a sneer of disbelief. "You," he said. The word came out like a cough. "What on earth are you doing here?" I didn't answer immediately. I walked past him, moving to the head of the long, white table. I pulled out the chair, the only chair with armrests, and sat down. Barton let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Ren, this is getting pathetic. Did you follow me? Did Caleb tell you I was flying to Austin for business? Is that it? You followed me halfway across the country to beg for forgiveness?" He shook his head, looking around the room as if expecting security to come and drag me away. "I told you at dinner," Barton said, his voice dropping to that condescending tone he used for children and service staff. You do not belong at the table. And you certainly do not belong in a high-level corporate negotiation. This is a place for adults. Ren, for people who sign checks, not people who look for handouts. Now get out before I have you escorted off the premises. It is embarrassing. He turned his back on me, looking toward the door, waiting for the real CEO to arrive. At that moment, the door slid open again. It was David, my chief technology officer. He was holding a file. He didn't look at Barton. He looked directly at me. Good morning, Ms. Stone, David said, his voice respectful and clear. I have the updated density reports you asked for. Do you want to review them before we begin the integration discussion? Barton froze. His back was still to me, but I saw his shoulders stiffen. It was a physical reaction, a glitch in his nervous system as his brain tried to process the input that contradicted his reality. Thank you, David, I said calmly. Just leave them on the table. And tell Maya we are ready to begin. Of course, Ms. Stone, David said. He placed the file in front of me and walked out. Barton turned around slowly. The sneer was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated confusion. He looked from the door, where David had exited, back to me, sitting in the CEO's chair. Ms. Stone? Barton repeated. He said my name as if it were a foreign word he couldn't quite pronounce. Why did he call you that? Because it is my name, I said. I know it is your name, Barton snapped, the panic starting to bleed into his voice. I mean, why is he treating you like you work here? I don't just work here, Barton, I said. I leaned back in the chair, resting my hands on the cool white surface of the table. I built this. Barton blinked. What? Lumen Veil Systems, I said. The company you are desperate to partner with. The technology you need to save your stock price. The strategic innovator you have been chasing for 3 months. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was tight enough to snap. It is me. Barton stared at me. He looked at the walls, the logo on the glass, the bustling office outside where dozens of engineers were working, and then back at me. That is impossible, he muttered. Lumen Veil is owned by Helix Ventures. We did the background check. It is a holding company. A holding company fully owned by a single shareholder, I corrected him. You did your due diligence, Barton. You investigated my past. You found out I grew up poor. You found out I went to state school. You found out I worked as a lab assistant. I leaned forward. But you forgot to investigate my present. Barton pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, as if his legs had suddenly given out. No, this is a joke. Caleb put you up to this. This is some kind of stunt. Is it? I asked. Let us check the facts. You are here because your solid-state battery division is failing. You need the patent for the graphite silicon anode architecture to meet the federal efficiency standards by the end of the year. Patent number US 98421. Inventor. Ren Stone. Barton's face went gray. You need a capital injection of technology because your debt covenants are about to trigger. I continued. You offered $40 million for a licensing deal. We rejected it. You came back with 60. We rejected it. Now you are here to offer a partnership because you are out of time. I opened the file David had left. I didn't look at it. I looked at Barton. You called me trash on Saturday night, I said softly. And on Monday morning, you walked into my house to ask for a loan. Barton wiped his forehead. He was sweating under the harsh lights. Just as Maya had predicted, he looked small. The grandeur of the Palm Beach estate was gone. Here, in the brutal clarity of the laboratory, he was just an old man with a bad balance sheet. Ren, he said. His voice changed. It shifted gears instantly, smoothing out into the oily, persuasive tone of a salesman. Ren, listen, I had no idea, obviously. If I had known that you were the mind behind this, things would have been different, would they? I asked. Of course, he said. leaning across the table, trying to conjure a smile. This changes everything. This is wonderful news. It means the partnership stays in the family. We can structure this perfectly. A merger. Ashford Horizon acquires Lumenvale. We give you a seat on the board, an advisory seat, of course, and we announce it as a joint victory. Think of the press. Daughter-in-law saves the legacy. It is a beautiful story. He was already rewriting history. He was already trying to absorb me, to digest my achievement and turn it into fuel for his own ego. There is no family. Barton, I said. Don't be dramatic, he said, waving a hand. What happened at dinner? Look, emotions were high. I am a protective father. You can understand that, but business is business. We have to separate the personal from the professional. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. Separate them? I asked. You are the one who mixed them. I stood up. I walked to the glass wall, looking out at the office floor. You didn't just insult me at dinner, I said, keeping my back to him. You judged my worth as a human being based on your perception of my power. You thought I was weak, so you treated me like garbage. Now you see I have power, and suddenly I am family. That is not separation. Barton, that is hypocrisy. I turned back to face him. And here's the reality, I said. Lumenvale is not signing the deal. Barton stood up, knocking his chair back. You can't do that. We have a verbal understanding. We have a term sheet. We have nothing, I said. We have a proposal, and I'm rejecting it. You don't understand, Barton said, his voice rising, the panic breaking through the veneer again. We need this announcement. The market is expecting it. If we walk away with nothing, the stock, the analysts will destroy us. I know, I said. I read your credit report. It makes for very interesting reading. Barton's eyes narrowed. You are doing this out of spite. This is vengeance. You are willing to blow up a $60 million deal just to hurt my feelings? That is bad business. Ren, that is emotional. It proves you are not ready for the big league. It is not spite, I said calmly. It is risk management. Why would I partner with a company that is technically insolvent? Why would I tie my brand to a CEO who leverages his own company to pay for his personal excess? Barton went still. How do you know about that? I know everything. Barton, I said. I know about the margin loans. I know about the covenant triggers. I know that you are one bad trading day away from losing control. I walked back to the table and placed my hands flat on the surface. So here are the new terms, I said. Lumenvale is withdrawing from the partnership negotiation effective immediately. We will issue a press release at noon stating that we could not reach an agreement due to governance concerns at Ashford Horizon. You can't say that, Barton hissed. That will tank the stock. That is not my problem, I said. However, if you want to avoid that press release, there is another option. What? Barton asked. Desperate. We don't do a partnership, I said. We don't do a merger. We talk about an acquisition. Acquisition? Barton laughed. A high, nervous sound. You want us to buy you? We are 10 times your size. No, Barton, I said, my voice ice cold. I am going to buy you. Barton stared at me as if I had spoken in tongues. You? Buy Ashford Horizon? You don't have the capital. You are a startup. I have the technology, I said. I have the clean balance sheet, and as of this morning, I have the backing of the bond market. I am not the trash, Barton. I am the landfill operator, and I am coming to clean up the mess. Barton looked at me with genuine fear now. He realized, finally, that he wasn't talking to Caleb's girlfriend. He was talking to a shark that had already smelled the blood in the water. You won't get away with this, he whispered. I have friends. I have influence. You have debt, I said, and by the end of the week, I will own that too. I pressed the button on the intercom. Maya, Mr. Ashford is leaving. Please escort him out and cancel his parking validation. We don't subsidize competitors. Barton stood there for a moment. his face flushing a deep, mottled red. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the chair. But he looked at the glass walls, at the dozens of employees watching him, and he knew he was trapped. He adjusted his jacket, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. "This isn't over," he said. "It was over the moment you opened your mouth on Saturday," I replied. He turned and walked out, stiff and angry, passing Maya on his way. He didn't look at her. I stood alone in the conference room. The adrenaline was still humming in my veins, but it was a steady, controlled burn. I looked at the empty chair where he had sat. He had walked in thinking he was a king visiting a peasant. He walked out knowing he was a tenant facing eviction. I picked up the file and closed it. "You called me trash because you thought I had no power," I said to the empty room. "Wrong. I just don't show off power." I walked out of the glass room and back to work. The market opened in 30 minutes, and I had a company to buy. The headline on the tablet screen screamed at me in bold, black letters that were designed to hurt. It read, "The Climber of Palm Beach. How a low-level researcher seduced an empire and is now trying to destroy it." I sat at my kitchen island, sipping black coffee, reading the article with the detachment of a surgeon looking at an X-ray of a broken bone. The text was a masterpiece of misogyny and class warfare. It described me not as a CEO or an inventor, but as a disgruntled fiancé and a woman of modest means who had infiltrated the Ashford family inner circle only to launch a hysterical vendetta when she did not get her way. It didn't mention my patents. It didn't mention that Lumenvale Systems was solvent while Ashford Horizon was bleeding cash. It only mentioned that my father was a mechanic and that I had worn a cheap dress to the now infamous dinner. Maya was pacing behind me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a metronome set to a manic tempo. "This is garbage," Maya spat out. "It is straight from the Ashford Crisis Management Playbook. They leaked this to the street ledger at midnight. They are trying to tank your reputation before the market opens. They want to paint you as unstable so the shareholders won't trust your tender offer." "It is not garbage," I said calmly, scrolling down to the comments section, which was already filling up with vitriol. "It is a strategy. Barton knows he cannot win on the balance sheet. He cannot win on technology. So he is trying to win on character. He wants to make this a catfight. He wants to make it about a girl who got her feelings hurt." "We have to respond," Maya insisted. "We have to issue a denial. We have to tell them about your degree, your awards, the fact that you built this company from a garage in Austin." "No," I said. I set the tablet down face up. "If we argue with a tabloid, we become a tabloid story. If I list my resume, I look defensive. We do not fight him in the mud. Maya, we fight him in the courtroom." My phone rang. The screen displayed a photo of Caleb, smiling on a boat in happier times. That photo felt like it belonged to a different life, a different century. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Ren?" Caleb's voice was breathless, panicked. "Have you seen it? The article?" "I am looking at it right now," I said. "It is a disaster," Caleb said. He is losing his mind. He called me at 6 a.m. screaming. He says you are humiliating the family. He says you are making us look like fools in front of the entire eastern seaboard." I closed my eyes for a second, feeling a sharp pang in my chest, not of regret, but of disappointment. "He says I am humiliating the family?" I repeated. "Caleb, your father paid a journalist to write that I am a gold-digging whore. Who is humiliating whom?" I know, Caleb stammered. "It is ugly, but you have to understand. He feels cornered. You threatened his company. Ren, you walked into his office and threatened to take everything he built. What did you expect him to do?" "I expected him to act like a CEO," I said. "Not like a high school bully." "Please, Ren," Caleb said, and his voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "Just stop. Withdraw the offer. Issue a statement saying it was a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I can smooth it over. If you just apologize for the hostile approach, I can get him to back off the press. We can go back to how it was. I went silent. The silence stretched over the line, heavy and suffocating. It was the same silence that had hung over the dinner table in Palm Beach. It was the sound of Caleb choosing the path of least resistance. He didn't want justice. He wanted quiet. He wanted the boat not to rock, even if it meant throwing me overboard to stabilize it. "Ren?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Are you there?" "I am here," I said. "But you are not—" "What does that mean?" "It means you are still sitting at that table." "Caleb," I said, "you are asking me to apologize to the man who abused me because it is inconvenient for you to watch him fight. You are not worried about my reputation. You are worried about your inheritance. That is not fair," he protested. "It is entirely fair," I said. "Tell your father I'm not withdrawing, and tell him that for every lie he prints, I will buy another 5% of his debt." I hung up the phone. I didn't slam it down. I pressed the red button with a precise, final motion. I felt a severance, like a rope snapping under tension. That was it. The personal tie was gone. Now, it was just business. I turned to Maya. "Get Dahlia on the encrypted line." 5 minutes later, Dahlia Mercer's voice filled the room via speakerphone. She sounded bored, which meant she was already 5 steps ahead. "I saw the article," Dahlia said. "Cute. Very vintage. I haven't seen the 'she seduced her way to the middle' narrative since 1995. "It is damaging," Maya said. "We are trending on social media, and not in a good way." "It is only damaging if we let it stick," Dahlia said. "Ren, do you want to sue for libel?" "No," I said. "Libel cases take 2 years. I want to end this in 2 weeks. I want you to send a cease and desist to the PR firm that represents Ashford Horizon. Not to the newspaper. They have protection. Go after the source. Tell the PR firm that we have evidence they are knowingly disseminating false information to manipulate a stock price during a tender offer period. That is securities fraud. Scare them. Make them afraid that if they send out one more press release, they will lose their license." "Done," Dahlia said. "I will have the letter on their desk within the hour, but that stops the bleeding. It doesn't heal the wound. We need a counter-narrative." "I have one," I said. "Barton is painting me as a destroyer. He says I am coming to strip the company and sell the parts. He is trying to scare the employees. He wants the unions to turn against me." I walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "Maya, draft a press release," I instructed. "Title it, 'The Future of Labor at Ashford Horizon.' State clearly that under Lumenvale ownership, there will be 0 layoffs for operational staff for 24 months. State that we will honor all existing pension obligations, and add a clause that we will be creating 500 new jobs by retrofitting the old coal plants with our battery technology." Maya's eyes widened. "That is bold. That locks us into a huge cost." "It buys us an army," I said. "Barton doesn't care about his workers. He has been cutting benefits for years. If I guarantee their jobs, I strip him of his human shield. I want the workers to look at Barton and see a liability, and look at me and see a paycheck." "Brilliant," Dahlia said over the phone. "You are bypassing the board and negotiating directly with the base. Barton won't know what hit him. He is fighting a culture war, and you are fighting a class war." The morning wore on, a blur of strategy and execution. We released the statement at 11 o'clock. By 1 o'clock, the narrative began to shift. The unions were cautious but interested. The financial blog started asking why a vengeful ex would guarantee pension funds. The logic of Barton's smear campaign was beginning to crack under the weight of hard numbers. But the pressure was mounting. My inbox was flooded with hate mail, clearly bot-generated, calling me every name in the book. My security team had to increase the patrol around the building because a few paparazzi had set up camp outside the gates. Then, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the phone calls started coming from inside the house. Maya rushed into my office, her face pale. "Ren, I have a line 3 blinking. It is a blocked number, but the area code is Palm Beach. The voice says he is a regional manager for Ashford Horizon." "Put it through," I said. I picked up the receiver. "This is Ren Stone." "Ms. Stone," a male voice whispered. He sounded terrified. "I cannot give you my name. I have worked for Ashford for 20 years. I run the logistics division for the Southeast Grid." "I am listening," I said. "You have to hurry," the man said. "He is burning the furniture to heat the house." "What do you mean?" "Barton," the man said. "He issued a directive this morning. He is liquidating the emergency repair inventory. He is selling off the spare transformers and the copper cabling meant for hurricane response. He is trying to raise cash to pay down the interest on the loans before the audit hits. If a storm hits Florida next week, we won't have the parts to fix the grid. He is risking the entire infrastructure just to save his seat." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just financial maneuvering anymore. This was negligence. This was dangerous. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "Can you send me the liquidation orders?" "I can't," the man said. "He has locked us out of the external email servers. We are being monitored." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Sit tight. Help is coming." I hung up. "Maya, did you record that?" "Yes," she said. "It is hearsay," I said, frustration gnawing at me. "We can't use it in court without a document. We need paper," as if the universe were listening. My laptop pinged with a notification. A new email had arrived in my encrypted inbox. The sender was Truthseeker88. The subject line was simple. "He is cooking the numbers." I hovered the mouse over the subject line. "Maya, look at this." Maya leaned in. "Who is it?" "I don't know," I said. "But look at the attachment size. 50 megabytes. That is a lot of data." "Open it," Maya urged, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. "If that is the proof that he is liquidating assets or falsifying the revenue recognition, we can bury him. We can leak it to the press right now. We can destroy him by the 6 o'clock news." My finger hovered over the mouse. The temptation was overwhelming. I could end this right now. I could send this file to every journalist who had printed Barton's lies this morning. I could watch him burn in the fire he had started. But something stopped me. A voice in the back of my head. The voice of the scientist. The researcher who knew that bad data ruined good experiments. "No," I said. I pulled my hand back. "What?" Maya looked at me like I was crazy. "Ren, this is the smoking gun. Why are you hesitating?" "Because I don't know who loaded the gun," I said. "What if it is a trap? What if Barton sent this? What if he wants me to leak falsified documents so he can sue me for corporate espionage and defamation? That would give him the legal grounds to block the acquisition permanently." I looked at the screen. The email sat there, tempting and dangerous. "We verify first," I said firmly. "Download it to an air-gapped drive. Give it to the forensic accounting team. I want them to cross-reference every single number in that file with the public 10K filings and the debt schedules we bought. If even one decimal point is off, we don't touch it. It will take hours," Maya argued. "We lose the news cycle." "I don't care about the news cycle," I said. "I care about the truth. Barton fights with rumors. We fight with facts. If I use dirty data to win, I am no better than him. I am not just taking his company. Maya, I am replacing his methodology." Maya stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. The frenzy left her eyes, replaced by respect. "Okay, I will take it to David. We will scrub it." She took the drive and left the room. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror in the corner of my office. I looked at myself. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my silk blouse was wrinkled from sitting for 10 hours. But my eyes were clear. Barton Ashford was out there, screaming at his son, liquidating safety equipment, and paying hacks to call me a whore. He was flailing. He was making noise. I was silent. I was waiting. "They want to turn me into a scandal," I whispered to my reflection, watching the steel in my own gaze. "They want a soap opera. They want a tragic romance." I straightened my blazer. "I will turn them into a case study." I turned off the lights in my office, leaving only the glow of the city outside. The verification would take all night, but I would wait. When I struck, It wouldn't be a scratch. It would be a fatal blow. The air in the conference room was stagnant, recycled, and heavy with the scent of stale coffee and high-stakes litigation. It was 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, nearly 40 hours since the dinner party that had started this war, and I was staring at a name on a screen that was about to change everything. Dahlia Mercer sat across from me, her pristine white suit finally showing a few wrinkles, a testament to the marathon session we had just pulled. She tapped the table with a manicured fingernail. "We verified it," Dahlia said, her voice low and devoid of triumph, replaced by the grim satisfaction of a prosecutor finding the murder weapon. "The source is real. The email came from a burner account, but the metadata on the attached spreadsheets has a digital fingerprint. It traces back to a terminal in the internal audit department of Ashford Horizon." "Who is it?" I asked. "Nina Ward," Dahlia said. "She is a senior compliance officer, 38 years old, been with the company for 12 years, according to her personnel file, which my investigator managed to pull. She has been passed over for promotion 3 times in the last 18 months, and 2 weeks ago, she filed an internal HR complaint about pressure to alter forecasting models. The complaint was buried." I looked at the photo Dahlia slid across the table. Nina Ward looked like 1,000 other corporate employees. Tired, professional, unassuming. She was the kind of person men like Barton Ashford ignored. He probably thought she was just part of the furniture, a human calculator designed to make his numbers look good. He didn't realize that calculators kept a record of every entry. "Walk me through the evidence," I said. "What exactly is he doing?" David, my CTO who had been scrubbing the data for hours, plugged his laptop into the main monitor. A spreadsheet filled the screen, a sea of numbers that would look boring to a layman, but looked like a crime scene to me. "It is a classic shell game," David explained, using a laser pointer to circle a column of figures. "See this entity here? Horizon Special Projects, LLC. It is a subsidiary that isn't fully consolidated on the main balance sheet. Barton is moving his toxic debt, the loans with the highest interest rates, into this subsidiary. It makes the parent company look healthier than it is." "That is aggressive," I noted. "But is it illegal?" "Wait," David said. "There is more. Look at the revenue column for the 4th quarter. He has booked $30 million in revenue from a grid maintenance contract with the state of Georgia." So, David said, clicking to the next slide. "I checked the state procurement database. That contract hasn't been signed yet. It is still in the bidding phase. He is booking future revenue as current cash to pump up the stock price before the fiscal year ends. That is securities fraud. That is jail time." I felt a chill go through me. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was Enron-level arrogance. Barton was so terrified of losing his status that he was willing to fabricate reality. "And here's the kicker," David added. "There is a hidden reserve fund. About $15 million. It is labeled contingency, but look at the withdrawal history. It is being used to pay the interest on his personal margin loans. He is embezzling company funds to save his own skin." The room went silent. The hum of the computer fans seemed to get louder. "We have him," Maya whispered. "We release this to the SEC. We release it to the press. He goes to prison. The board collapses. You walk in and pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar." "No," I said instantly. Maya looked at me, shocked. "What?" "Ren, this is the kill shot. If we release this now," I said, standing up and pacing the small room, "the stock goes to zero, the company gets delisted, the assets get frozen by the federal government for years of investigation, the employees lose their pensions, the technology, my technology that I want to integrate, gets tied up in litigation. I don't want to rule over a graveyard. Maya, I want a functioning company." I turned to Dahlia. "We don't leak it," I said. "We use it?" Dahlia smiled, a slow, predatory expression. "Leverage." "Exactly," I said. "We treat Nina Ward as a protected whistleblower. I want you to contact her through a secure channel. Tell her we have her data. Tell her we are not going to expose her identity to the press. Tell her that if she testifies to the board, in a closed session, I will personally guarantee her legal fees and her employment contract. She will be terrified, Dahlia warned. She is already terrified, I said. Right now, she is holding a grenade and waiting for it to go off. I am offering to take the pin out safely. Get her on our side. And the fraud? Dahlia asked. We hold it, I said. It is our insurance policy. If Barton refuses to leave quietly, we show it to the board. We give them a choice. Oust him and let me fix the mess, or back him and go to prison as accessories. Dahlia nodded. Making a note. The clean hands doctrine. I like it. It keeps you looking like the savior, not the executioner. Now, I said, shifting gears. Where do we stand on the bonds? Maya checked her tablet. The purchase orders cleared an hour ago. We now own 22% of the outstanding senior debt of Ashford Horizon. We are officially their largest single creditor. Good, I said. That gives us standing. We are no longer just a hostile bidder. We are the bank. However, Dahlia interrupted, her tone sharpening. Barton isn't sitting still. 10 minutes ago, the Ashford Horizon General Counsel filed a form with the SEC. They have activated the poison pill. I stopped pacing. The poison pill. It was the standard defense against a hostile takeover, formerly known as a shareholder rights plan. It allowed existing shareholders to buy massive amounts of new stock at a deep discount if any single investor, me, bought more than 15% of the company. It would dilute my ownership, making it mathematically impossible for me to buy a majority stake without spending billions of dollars I didn't have. He is trying to flood the market, I said. He wants to drown me in paper. It is a strong move, Dahlia admitted. Usually, this stops a takeover dead in the tracks. Usually, I said. But a poison pill is designed to protect the shareholders from a predatory raider. It is not designed to protect a criminal CEO from his own negligence. Precisely, Dahlia said, pulling a document from her briefcase. I have drafted a response. We are going to file a lawsuit in the Delaware Court of Chancery immediately. We are arguing that the activation of the poison pill is a breach of fiduciary duty. On what grounds? Maya asked. On the grounds that the current management presents a systemic risk to the solvency of the company, Dahlia explained. We don't need to prove the fraud publicly yet. We just need to prove that Barton's leadership has destroyed shareholder value to the point where refusing a premium offer, my offer, is negligence. We are telling the judge, you cannot use a poison pill to commit suicide. It is a narrow path, I said. Judges hate interfering in board decisions. They do, Dahlia agreed. Unless the shareholders are screaming for help. I looked at the clock. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. Get me Sterling Point Capital, I said. The activist fund? Maya asked. Now? They are in New York, I said. It is 5 o'clock there. Their head of distressed assets, Marcus Thorne, is likely at the gym or at his desk. Try the desk. 10 minutes later, the face of Marcus Thorne appeared on the video wall. He was a sharp-featured man in his 40s, wearing a workout hoodie, sitting in an office that overlooked Central Park. He didn't look tired. He looked hungry. Ms. Stone, Marcus said, his voice crisp. I have been following your exploits in the tabloids. Quite the drama. I didn't know you had it in you. Skip the small talk. Marcus, I said, I am not calling to discuss my engagement. Fair enough, he said. You are calling because Barton triggered the pill and you need votes to bypass the board. You need me to join your tender offer. I don't just need your votes, I said. I need your noise. You own 4% of the company. I want you to publicly call for the board to redeem the pill and accept my deal. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Why would I do that? Barton is a dinosaur. Yes, but he pays a dividend. You are a tech founder. You represent risk. You want to pivot the company to renewables. That costs money. Dividends disappear during a pivot. The dividends are funded by debt. Marcus, I said bluntly, and the debt wall is 3 weeks away. If Barton stays, there is no dividend. There is only Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That is speculation. It is arithmetic, I countered. I own 22% of the bonds. I know the covenants. He is insolvent. I let that sink in. I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Okay, Marcus said slowly. Say I believe you. Say I back you. What is the plan? You fire Barton. Fine. Who runs the ship? You? You have never run a utility. I run the strategy, I said. I bring in the technology that saves the margins. But for operations? I keep the existing team. I have already pledged to protect the workforce. That keeps the unions from striking. And for the transition CEO? I paused. This was the gamble. I will appoint a turnaround specialist approved by you, I said. Someone Sterling Point trusts. You get 2 seats on the new board. You get to oversee the restructuring. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, but it was a deal-making smile. He wanted control. I was giving him control, but only the kind of control I didn't need. I needed to own the vision. He needed to own the governance. You are smarter than you look in the papers, Ms. Stone, Marcus said. If you can prove the insolvency risk to my analysts by noon, Sterling Point will issue a letter supporting your bid. We will call the poison pill an entrenchment device and demand the board deactivate it. You will have the data, I said. A courier is already on the way. The screen went black. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath. The alliance was formed. I had the debt. I had the whistleblower. I had the activist investors. The trap was set. Now, we just had to wait for the mouse. By Wednesday morning, the atmosphere at Ashford Horizon had shifted from panic to terror. Maya's network of informants, now growing by the hour, reported that Barton was locked in his office. He wasn't yelling anymore. Silence was always worse than yelling. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was a direct line from a number I recognized. It was the private wealth division of the sovereign bank that held Barton's personal margin loans. Ms. Stone, the banker said. His voice was polite, the kind of polite that accompanies a funeral. We are reaching out because we understand you are now a major holder of Ashford Horizon debt. I am, I said. We have a situation regarding the collateral for Mr. Ashford's personal accounts, the banker said. Given the volatility in the stock price, driven by your tender offer and the rumors of the poison pill litigation, the value of his pledged assets has fallen below the maintenance requirement. You are margin calling him, I said. We have issued a demand for additional collateral, the banker corrected, ever diplomatic. He has 24 hours to post cash or eligible securities. If he fails to do so, we will be forced to liquidate his position in the company to cover the loan. I closed my eyes and let the feeling wash over me. It wasn't joy, it was relief. The math had worked. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because, the banker said, if we liquidate 30 million shares on the open market, the price will crash. We would prefer to execute a private block trade. We were wondering if Helix Ventures would be interested in purchasing the block. I almost laughed. It was the ultimate irony. The bank was offering to sell me Barton's own shares, the shares he used to control his empire, to pay off the debts he incurred trying to look rich. I will buy them, I said, but at a discount, 10% below market. That is, aggressive, the banker said. He is distressed, I said. And I am the only buyer with cash. Take it or dump it on the market and watch it go to zero. We will prepare the paperwork, the banker said. I hung up the phone. I walked out into the main work area where Dahlia was reviewing the final draft of the tender offer. She looked up, sensing the shift in my energy. What happened? She asked. The ground just opened up, I said. The banks are calling his loans. They are selling his shares to me. By tomorrow afternoon, he won't just be a bad CEO. He will be a minority shareholder in his own company. Dahlia put down her pen. So, we have him. He has no money, no allies, and no voting power. Do you want to call him? Do you want to hear him beg? I thought about it. I thought about the way he had looked at me over the crystal glass, the way he had pronounced the word trash. I thought about the satisfaction of hearing his voice crack, of hearing him offer me the apology Caleb had been so desperate for. But then I looked at the whiteboard where we had mapped out the integration plan for the renewable grid. I looked at the list of patents we were going to deploy. I looked at the future. Barton Ashford was the past. You don't negotiate with the past. You just turn the page. No, I said to Dahlia. I don't want to talk to him. I don't need him to apologize for who he is. I picked up the tender offer document, the one that included the mandatory resignation clause for all executive officers. I don't need him to apologize, I repeated, staring at the legal language that would strip him of his title. I need him to vacate. Then let us file, Dahlia said. File it, I commanded. And send a copy to Caleb. I want him to read the eviction notice at the same time his father does. The trapdoor had swung open. Gravity was taking over. All that was left was the fall. The knocking at my door on Thursday evening was not the frantic pounding of a man in crisis. It was a steady, rhythmic rap. 3 knocks, a pause, then silence. It was the sound of someone who was willing to wait, or willing to walk away if I did not answer. I checked the security feed on the tablet mounted by the foyer. It was Caleb. For the last 4 days, I had visualized this moment a dozen times. In some versions, he was screaming. In others, he was begging, tears streaming down his face, asking me to stop the lawsuit, to stop the bond purchases, to stop destroying his heritage. I had prepared speeches for all those versions. I had prepared the cold, analytical shutdowns that would protect me from his emotional gravity. But the man on the screen didn't look like he was ready to scream or beg. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans, not the bespoke suits he usually wore to please his father. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just looking at the door. I unlocked it. Caleb stepped inside. The air between us was thick, charged with the static of the last 96 hours. He looked at me, really looked at me, scanning my face not for anger, but for damage. You look tired. Ren, he said quietly. I am buying a billion-dollar utility company. Caleb, I said, leaning against the doorframe, keeping my arms crossed. It is exhausting work. I know, he said. I read the filings. The poison pill suit in Delaware. The whistleblower protections. You are dismantling him piece by piece. I am dismantling the dysfunction, I corrected. Your father is just the structural failure point. I walked into the living room, leaving the door open for him to follow or leave. He followed. He stood by the couch, his hands in his pockets, looking out at the city lights, the same view I had stared at the night I decided to go to war. He called me this morning, Caleb said. He didn't say Dad. He just said, he? I assumed he would, I said. Did he tell you to break up with me? Or did he tell you to sue me? He gave me an ultimatum, Caleb said. He turned to face me. For the first time in the 2 years I had known him, he wasn't fidgeting. His hands were still. His jaw was set. He told me that if I didn't issue a public statement denouncing you by 5 o'clock today, he would cut me out, not just from the will, from the trusts, from the family office. He said he would freeze my accounts and ensure I never worked in the energy sector again. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, even when he was losing. Barton Ashford tried to rule by fear. He treated his son like an asset to be liquidated if it didn't perform. I am sorry, Caleb, I said, and I meant it. He is a monster, but you don't have to worry about money. You know I have— No, Caleb interrupted. He held up a hand. Don't offer to save me. Ren, that is just trading one parent for another. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't legal size. It was just a plain sheet of printer paper. He walked over and placed it on the coffee table between us. I didn't issue the statement he wanted, Caleb said. I sent this instead. I picked up the paper. It was a letter addressed to the board of directors of Ashford Horizon. It was time-stamped 3 o'clock that afternoon. I, Caleb Ashford, hereby resign from my position as Vice President of Strategic Relations and from my seat on the Board of Directors, effective immediately. My resignation is due to irreconcilable ethical differences regarding the governance and financial practices of the current leadership. I looked up at him. You resigned. I quit, he said, before the market closed, before he could fire me, before he could use me as a pawn. Caleb, I said, the paper crinkling slightly in my hand. You walked away from the legacy. That seat was your birthright. It was the only thing he ever valued about you. That is the point, Caleb said. He let out a long breath, as if he had been holding it for 30 years. I realized something on Saturday night. Ren, when he called you trash. And everyone froze. I froze too. I told myself I was shocked. I told myself I was trying to be diplomatic. He shook his head. But that was a lie. I wasn't shocked. He has been talking to me like that since I was 5 years old. You are too soft. Caleb, you are weak. Caleb, you are an embarrassment. Caleb, that dinner wasn't an accident. It was just the public version of our private life. He took a step closer to me. The fear that had always lived in his eyes, the anxiety that made him check his watch, check the room, check his father's mood, was gone. In its place was a quiet, somber clarity. I lived my whole life waiting for him to give me permission to be a man, Caleb said. I thought if I followed the rules, if I married the right woman, if I wore the right tie, eventually he would respect me. But he doesn't know how to respect anyone. He only knows how to own them. So you left, I said. I left, he confirmed. I packed a bag. I moved into a hotel downtown. I am not the heir anymore. Ren, I am just a guy with a resume and a very angry father. I looked at him, and for the first time since the dinner, I didn't see the man who had failed to defend me. I saw the man who had finally learned to defend himself. Why are you here, Caleb? I asked softly. Because I have something for you, he said. He reached into his pocket again, this time. He didn't pull out a resignation letter. He pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was worn at the edges. I know you have the data, Caleb said. I know you have the debt schedules. I saw the news about the whistleblower. You have the numbers, but you don't have the people. He held the notebook out to me. This isn't insider information, he said quickly. There are no trade secrets in here, no financial data. This is social cartography. I took the notebook. I opened it. It was filled with Caleb's handwriting, notes he had taken over years of board meetings and family galas. Page 4, Caleb pointed. Director Holloway, he hates my father. They had a falling out 10 years ago over a golf course deal in Scotland. He votes with Dad only because he is afraid of being sued. If you offer him an indemnity clause, he flips. I turned the page. Page 10. Caleb continued. The chaotic neutral, Mrs. Vance, she controls a large block of preferred shares. She doesn't care about the stock price. She cares about the environmental impact. She thinks Dad is a dinosaur. If you show her the specs on your sodium-ion battery recyclability, she will back your tender offer publicly. I looked through the book. It was a roadmap of the emotional and psychological landscape of the Ashford Empire. It was a list of every grudge, every favor, every hidden alliance that Barton used to maintain control. It was the kind of intelligence that money couldn't buy. Why are you giving me this? I asked. This helps me destroy him. No, Caleb said. It helps you stop him. There is a difference. He looked at the notebook in my hands. I am not doing this to get back at him, Caleb said. I am doing it because you are right. The company is rotting. The culture is toxic. If he stays, he takes it all down. The workers, the pension funds, the history. You are the only one who can save the actual business. I am giving you the keys to the boardroom because you are the only one who deserves to sit there. I closed the notebook. I felt a lump in my throat. I had wanted a partner who would stand in front of me and take the bullets. But Caleb was doing something more difficult. He was standing beside me, handing me the ammunition. Thank you, I said. There is one more thing, Caleb said, and this is the hard part. What? I want to speak, he said. When you call the general meeting, when you take over, I want to address the employees. I frowned. Caleb, you don't have to do that. You can walk away. You can start over. If you stand up there, people will say you betrayed your father. They will call you Brutus. Let them, he said firmly. I need to do it. Ren, look at the narrative. The press is painting you as the vindictive outsider destroying a family legacy. If I stay silent, that story sticks. You win the company, but you lose the culture. The employees will always look at you as the woman who stole the throne. He took a deep breath. But if I stand up there, he said, and I tell them that I resigned because I believe in your vision, if I tell them that I chose competence over bloodline, then the narrative changes. It validates you. It proves you are not a usurper. You are the successor. I stared at him. He was right. Strategically, it was brilliant. Emotionally, it was devastating. He was offering to publicly sever the last tie to his father to ensure my legitimacy. You realize he will never forgive you, I said. If you do that, there is no going back, no Thanksgiving dinners, no reconciliation. I know, Caleb said. But I don't want a reconciliation based on silence. I want a life based on truth. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. You told me at the dinner that you didn't need a man to protect you, he said. You were right. You don't. You are the strongest person I've ever met. But you said you needed consequences. I am helping you deliver them. I walked over to the coffee table and set the notebook down on top of his resignation letter. The two documents lay there, a testament to the end of an era. Caleb, I said. Yeah? I am not going to thank you for saving me, I said. Because I was going to win anyway. A small, genuine smile touched his lips. I know you were, but, I added, I will thank you for being the man I thought you were. Finally. I reached out my hand. He looked at it. He didn't pull me into a hug. He didn't try to kiss me. He understood the new boundaries. We weren't lovers in a romance novel anymore. We were allies in a war zone. He took my hand. His grip was firm, warm, and steady. There was no trembling. This isn't a redemption arc, Caleb, I said, holding his gaze. I am not going to give you a medal for doing the right thing, and I can't promise that we go back to how we were. Too much has broken. I don't want to go back, he said. Back was a lie. This is real. Yes, I said. This is real. So, he said, releasing my hand but holding my eyes. What is the next move? The banks are squeezing him. You have the whistleblower. You have the notebook. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, I said. We turn the pressure into a vacuum. We take away his air. Good, Caleb said. I checked the schedule in that notebook. The board is meeting an emergency session on Friday morning. That is 36 hours from now. Then we have 36 hours to make sure that when they walk into that room, they already know how they are going to vote. Caleb nodded. He looked at the door. I should go. I have a lot of calls to make. I need to return the company car before he reports it stolen. Caleb, I called out as he turned to leave. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. You are not trash, I said. He froze. His shoulders relaxed, dropping an inch. He didn't turn around, but I saw him nod. Neither are you, he said softly. You are the CEO. He opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him. I stood alone in the apartment, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't the lonely silence of a siege, it was the focused silence of a command center. I picked up the notebook. I walked to the window. The city was spread out below me, a grid of power and possibility. I opened the book to the first page. Director Holloway. I pulled out my phone. It was time to make a call. I didn't need a knight in shining armor. I had never needed one. But a partner who knew where the bodies were buried? That was something I could work with. The romance was dead. Long live the merger. Monday morning arrived with the heavy, electric atmosphere of a storm front moving in before the rain actually falls. The sky over the city was a bruised purple, but inside the boardroom of Ashford Horizon Energy, the air was even more suffocating. The stock market had opened 30 minutes ago, and the ticker running across the bottom of the wall-mounted screens showed a sea of red. The share price was oscillating violently, reacting to the rumors of a liquidity crisis and the sudden, unexplained resignation of the CEO's son. I stood in the hallway outside the double oak doors, checking my reflection in the glass panel. I was not wearing the black dress from the dinner, nor the casual clothes from the weekend. I was wearing a suit of slate gray, sharp enough to cut glass. With a white silk shirt underneath, it was armor. Dahlia Mercer stood beside me, holding a leather portfolio that contained enough legal firepower to level a small country. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low. "I have been ready since the appetizer course," I replied. We did not wait to be announced. We did not knock. At 9 o'clock exactly, I pushed the doors open and walked into the sanctuary of the Ashford Empire. The room was vast, dominated by a table that seemed to stretch for miles. At the head sat Barton Ashford. He looked like a king who had spent 3 nights in a bunker. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pasty, but his posture was rigid with defensive arrogance. Around him sat the 12 members of the board, men and women in expensive suits who looked terrified. Barton slammed his hand on the table as I entered. "This is a private meeting of the board of directors," he barked, standing up. "Security, get her out of here. She has no standing." "Actually," Dahlia said, her voice slicing through his bluster like a razor blade, "Ms. Stone has standing as the holder of 22% of your senior secured debt, and as the proxy for the Sterling Point Capital voting bloc. She is legally entitled to observe any meeting where the solvency of the company is discussed." Dahlia slid a document across the polished wood. It stopped perfectly in front of the corporate secretary. "The bylaws are clear," Dahlia added. "Unless you want to add denial of creditor rights to the list of lawsuits we filed in Delaware this morning." Barton's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his tie. He looked at the other directors. He was waiting for them to rally, to shout me down, to defend the castle, but nobody moved. I looked at Director Holloway. The man Caleb had told me about in the notebook. He was staring at his coffee cup, refusing to meet Barton's eye. I looked at Mrs. Vance, the environmentalist. She was looking at me with intense curiosity. The silence was the first victory. "Fine," Barton spat, sitting back down. "Sit. Watch. It won't matter. You are witnessing a waste of time." I took a seat at the opposite end of the table. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. It was a duel. "Let us be clear about what is happening here," Barton said, addressing the board but glaring at me. "This woman is attempting to blackmail this company. She has manipulated the bond market, spread lies to the press, and turned my own son against his family, all because of a personal vendetta. She is a terrorist, plain and simple. She wants to steal this company for pennies on the dollar." He leaned forward, his voice dripping with venom. "She claims she has a plan," Barton sneered. "But we all know what she is. She is a scavenger. She will strip the assets, fire the workforce, and sell the technology to the Chinese. She is not here to build. She is here to loot." The directors shifted in their seats. This was the narrative they feared. They were old money. They feared disruption more than they feared bankruptcy. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't interrupt. I just waited for him to finish, and then I took the floor. "Director Ashford is telling you a very compelling ghost story," I said, my voice steady. "But I am here to talk about math." I pressed a button on the remote I had brought, hijacking the main presentation screen. The red stock ticker disappeared, replaced by a clean white slide with the Lumenvale logo next to the Ashford Horizon logo. "My tender offer is simple," I said. "I am offering to purchase all outstanding shares at a premium of 15% over the 30-day average. I am offering to retire the toxic debt using my own capital reserves. And most importantly, I am offering a strategy. I click to the next slide. Ashford Horizon is currently burning cash on outdated coal infrastructure and paying fines for carbon non-compliance, I explained. My plan is a retrofit. We install Lumenvale's solid-state storage batteries into your existing grid. We turn your liabilities into assets. We stop bleeding cash. And we start selling stability. I looked directly at Mrs. Vance. And to be clear, I said, addressing the room, this is not a liquidation. I have already issued a legally binding pledge to the unions. No layoffs for operational staff. We are keeping the pension fund intact. We are retraining the workforce, not replacing them. Mrs. Vance nodded slowly. That is an expensive promise. Ms. Stone, it is an investment, I corrected. Something the current leadership has forgotten how to make. Barton laughed. It was a loud, jarring sound. An investment? He mocked. With what money? You are a startup. Wren, you have a few patents and a nice slide deck. You don't have the capital to save a company of this size. You are bluffing. He stood up again, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. And that is why, Barton announced, spreading his arms wide, I have secured a real solution, a solution that preserves the dignity of this institution. The doors opened again. My stomach tightened. This was not in the script. 2 men walked in. They were dressed in suits that cost more than my car. With the slicked-back hair and predatory shark eyes of high-finance mercenaries. I recognized the logo on the briefcase of the lead man instantly. Iron Vale Capital. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Barton announced, looking like he had just drawn a royal flush. May I present our white knight? Iron Vale Capital has agreed to inject $500 million of liquidity into Ashford Horizon immediately. They will refinance our debt. They will stabilize the stock. The lead man, introduced as Mr. Sterling, no relation to the Institute, smiled thinly. We believe in the legacy of Ashford Horizon. We believe that with the right capital structure, this company can thrive, and we believe that stability requires continuity. He looked at Barton. Our term sheet includes a provision for Mr. Ashford to remain as CEO for a minimum of 5 years. The Iron Vale man said. The room exhaled. I could see the tension leaving the shoulders of the older directors. This was what they wanted. A bailout. No change, no risk, no scary new technology, just a big check and the status quo. Barton looked at me down the length of the table. His eyes were gleaming. You see, Wren, he said softly, this is how the big boys play. You tried to corner me, but you forgot that I have friends. Iron Vale understands value. They aren't trying to steal the company. They are trying to save it. They are offering $20 a share, Barton continued, addressing the board. It is lower than Ms. Stone's offer, yes, but it comes with security. It comes with me. For a moment, I felt the ground shake. It was a brilliant countermove. Iron Vale was a notorious private equity firm, known for buying distressed assets. If they backed Barton, my tender offer was dead. The board would always choose the path that kept them in their comfort zone. I looked at Dahlia. She didn't look worried. She looked bored. She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a thick document. She didn't slide it. She held it up. Mr. Sterling, Dahlia said, addressing the Iron Vale representative. This is the draft term sheet you sent to Mr. Ashford's legal team at 3 o'clock this morning, correct? The man blinked. That is confidential work product. Not when it is leaked to a creditor who is concerned about the impairment of their collateral, Dahlia said smoothly. We obtained a copy. She turned to the board. Barton told you the headline, Dahlia said. He forgot to read you the footnotes. She opened the document to a page flagged with a red tab. Clause 42, Section B. Dahlia read aloud. In exchange for the liquidity injection, Iron Vale requires a cost rationalization program to be implemented within 90 days. She looked up. That is a fancy word for layoffs. Dahlia said. Specifically, the document calls for a 40% reduction in the workforce. That is 2,000 jobs. The room went deadly silent. Clause 44, Dahlia continued, flipping the page. The sale of non-core assets. Iron Veil defines non-core assets as the research and development division and the patent portfolio. They intend to sell off the grid technology to a foreign competitor to recoup their investment quickly. She dropped the document onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. And finally, Dahlia said, looking at Barton with pity, Clause 50, the executive retention bonus. Mr. Ashford gets a $10 million bonus for signing the deal. But his authority is stripped. He becomes a figurehead. He can't sign a check for more than $5,000 without Iron Veil's approval. I stood up again. I walked toward the center of the table. So let us recap, I said, looking at the directors one by one. Barton isn't saving the company. He is selling it for parts. He is firing 2,000 people, the people who keep your lights on, so he can keep his title and get a $10 million check. I turned to face Barton. He was pale again. The smirk was gone. You called me trash, I said quietly. But you are the one trying to sell your own family legacy to a chop shop just to save your ego. That is standard boilerplate language, Barton stammered, looking at the Iron Veil reps for help. We would negotiate that out. The Iron Veil man didn't speak. He just checked his watch. He knew the game was up. I have a question for the board, I said, my voice ringing in the silence. Who wants to save the company? And who wants to buy a corpse? Director Holloway cleared his throat. Ms. Stone, these are serious allegations. But Iron Veil offers cash. Your offer relies on the solvency of the current books. And frankly, we have concerns about the debt. I am glad you brought up the books, I said. I signaled to David, who was sitting in the back corner. He walked forward and handed a blue folder to every director. This is an independent forensic audit, I announced, conducted over the last 48 hours. This is illegal, Barton screamed. You have no right to our internal data. The data was provided by a whistleblower in accordance with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, I said calmly, and we have verified every line item. I pointed to the folder. Open it to page 7, I instructed. The directors opened the folders. I heard gasps. I heard a muttered curse from the treasurer. The $30 million in revenue from the Georgia contract, I said. It doesn't exist. The contract was never signed. Barton booked it to hide the losses in the third quarter. The contingency fund? I continued. Gone. Used to pay margin interest on personal loans. I looked at Barton. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like a man watching his house burn down from the inside. These are not just bad numbers, I said. This is fraud. If you vote for the Iron Veil deal, you are ratifying these numbers. You are making yourselves accessories to a federal crime. If you vote for me, we restate the earnings. We settle with the SEC, and we clean it up. Mrs. Vance closed the folder. She looked at Barton with pure disgust. Is this true, Barton? She asked. It is a matter of interpretation, Barton sputtered. It is complex accounting. She doesn't understand high finance. I understand that 1 + 1 = 2, Mrs. Vance said icily, and I understand that you have been lying to us. The room was teetering. The board was horrified. But they were paralyzed by habit. They had followed Barton for 20 years. Breaking that loyalty was terrified. Then, the screen on the wall flickered. The video call connected. The face of Marcus Thorne from Sterling Point Capital filled the room. He was larger than life, sitting in his New York office. Good morning, Marcus's voice boomed. I am watching the proceedings. I represent 4% of the equity, and I am speaking on behalf of a coalition of institutional investors holding another 10%. Barton looked at the screen, hope flickering in his eyes. Maybe the activists would save him? Maybe they wanted the Iron Veil cash? We have reviewed the Iron Veil term sheet, Marcus said. It is a disaster. It destroys long-term value for short-term liquidity. We have also reviewed Ms. Stone's restructuring plan. Marcus paused. Sterling Point supports the Lumenvale tender offer, he declared. We believe Ms. Stone is the only operator capable of navigating the debt crisis. If the board votes to activate the poison pill or accept the Iron Veil deal, we will sue every single director personally for breach of fiduciary duty, and we will win. That was the hammer blow. The threat of personal liability broke the spell. The directors looked at each other. They looked at the fake revenue numbers. They looked at the Iron Veil sharks who were already packing up their briefcases. And then they looked at Barton. He was sitting alone at the head of the table. The Iron Veil team had stepped away from him. His lawyer was staring at the floor. He was isolated. He looked at me. For the first time, there was no filter of daughter-in-law or trash or upstart. He saw the chessboard. He saw that his king was surrounded. You plotted this, Barton whispered. You planned every step. I did, I said. You destroyed my family, he said. No, Barton, I replied, standing tall at the other end of the table. I just audited it. Director Holloway stood up. He looked at Barton, then at me. I moved to suspend the current session, Holloway said, his voice shaking slightly. And I moved to enter into immediate, exclusive negotiations with Lumenvale Systems regarding the change of control. Seconded, Mrs. Vance said instantly. All in favor? Holloway asked. 11 hands went up. Barton did not raise his hand. He sat there, staring at the polished wood, as the empire he had built on bullying and debt dissolved around him. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just looked at Dahlia and nodded. The war wasn't over yet. He still had to sign the papers. But the battle for the boardroom was finished. The table belonged to me. The 48 hours following the board meeting were not a battle. They were a siege. Barton Ashford did not go quietly into the night. He did not look at the forensic audit, hang his head, and accept defeat. Instead, he lashed out with the frantic, terrifying energy of a cornered animal. He tried to burn the house down rather than let me take the keys. It started on Tuesday afternoon, just hours after the board had voted to enter negotiations with me. I was sitting in the temporary command center we had set up in the hotel suite across from the Ashford headquarters when Dahlia walked in. She wasn't smiling. He filed, Dahlia said, dropping a thick packet of court documents onto the desk. A lawsuit? I asked. A temporary restraining order, she corrected. He went to a federal judge in the Southern District. He is claiming that your tender offer is based on illegally obtained confidential information and constitutes market manipulation. He is asking the court to freeze your assets and block the acquisition until a full investigation can be conducted. I picked up the filing. It was desperate. It was filled with adjectives like predatory, malicious, and conspiratorial. It was the legal equivalent of throwing sand in my eyes. Does he have a case? I asked. No, Dahlia said, but he has a strategy. He knows a TRO will pause everything for 10 days. In those 10 days, he hopes to find a new white knight investor, or shred the evidence of the fraud, or simply cause enough chaos that the banks get spooked and pull your funding. He is buying time, I said. He is trying to stop the clock. Dahlia agreed. We have a hearing at 4 o'clock. Judge Reynolds. He is tough, and he hates corporate drama. We went to court. The room was sterile, smelling of wood polish and old decisions. Barton was not there. He sent his lead counsel, a man named Sterling, no relation to the activist fund, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The argument was fierce. Barton's lawyer painted me as a corporate raider who had seduced the CEO's son to steal trade secrets. He tried to turn the whistleblower's data into stolen property, but I had something they didn't. I had transparency. When the judge asked about the source of my data, Dahlia didn't hide behind privilege. She laid out the entire timeline: the whistleblower protections, the independent verification, the SEC filings we had proactively submitted that morning. We showed that we weren't hiding the dirt. We were the ones cleaning it up. Your Honor, Dahlia said, standing tall in the center of the courtroom. Mr. Ashford is asking for this order not to protect the shareholders, but to protect himself from the consequences of his own mismanagement. A restraining order is designed to prevent irreparable harm. The only harm happening here is to Mr. Ashford's ego. Judge Reynolds took 10 minutes to review the papers. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. I watched the clock on the wall ticking. Every second was a second Barton was using to maneuver. Finally, the judge looked up. "Motion denied," he said, his gavel coming down with a sound like a gunshot. "The court finds no evidence of manipulation. The tender offer proceeds. Next case." We walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. The first wall of Barton's defense had crumbled, but the squeeze was just beginning. By Wednesday morning, the financial reality began to tighten around Barton's throat. The banks, having seen the audit report during the board meeting, were no longer asking polite questions. They were making demands. Maya monitored the chatter from the trading floor. "The syndicate of lenders just issued a formal notice of default on the revolving credit line," she reported, her eyes glued to the screen. "Because of the accounting irregularities regarding the Georgia contract, Ashford Horizon is technically in breach of its loan covenants. They are demanding immediate posting of additional collateral, $50 million in cash, by close of business today." "Does the company have $50 million?" I asked, knowing the answer. "No," Maya said. "They have $8 million in the operating account. Barton spent the rest on stock buybacks last month to artificially prop up the price." "So he is insolvent," I said. "Technically, yes," Maya said. "He is looking for a lifeline. He is calling everyone, private equity, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East." "And Ironvale?" I asked. "The White Knight?" "Gone," Maya said. Ironvale withdrew their offer at 9 o'clock this morning. They cited material adverse changes in the financial disclosures. Basically, they saw the fraud and ran. They are vultures. Ren. But even vultures don't eat poisoned meat. Barton was alone. The banks were closing in. The investors had fled. The courts had rejected him. Then came the internal collapse. It is a strange thing to watch a corporate hierarchy disintegrate. It happens slowly, then all at once. For years, the executives at Ashford Horizon had protected Barton because their bonuses depended on his survival. But now, with the ship taking on water, the survival instinct kicked in. It started with a leak. At noon, the Wall Street Journal published an article citing senior executives who claimed that they had been pressured by Barton to sign off on the fake revenue projections. The article included screenshots of emails from the CFO explicitly questioning the legality of the moves, and Barton's replies ordering him to get it done. The rats were not just leaving the ship. They were pointing out the holes in the hull on their way out. "They are turning on him," I said, reading the article. "They are trying to cut deals with the SEC before the indictment comes down." "It gets worse for him," Dahlia said, checking her phone. "The general counsel just resigned. He sent a letter to the board saying he can no longer represent the office of the CEO due to ethical conflicts." Barton Ashford, the man who had commanded a room of senators and billionaires just 4 days ago, couldn't even keep his own lawyer. But the hardest blow, the one that I knew would hurt him more than the bankruptcy or the jail time, came at 2 o'clock. Caleb kept his word. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't make a spectacle. He simply released a statement through the Associated Press. It was short, dignified, and devastating. I read it on the news ticker as it broke. Statement from Caleb Ashford regarding his resignation. For 3 generations, the Ashford name has stood for leadership in American energy. However, true leadership requires accountability. I have resigned from the board because I can no longer support a culture that prioritizes short-term stock price over long-term integrity. I believe the future of this company lies in transparency and innovation. I fully support the restructuring plan proposed by Lumenvale Systems, not as a family matter, but as a business necessity. It is time to turn the page. It was the final nail. By publicly backing me, Caleb destroyed Barton's last line of defense. the family legacy narrative. He stripped his father of the moral high ground. He told the world that this wasn't a hostile takeover by an outsider. It was a rescue mission endorsed by the heir. The market reacted instantly. The stock price, which had been fluctuating wildly, stabilized. The shareholders saw Caleb's endorsement as a signal that the war was ending. They stopped selling and started waiting for the tender offer to close. At 4 o'clock, I decided it was time to end it. I sat in my office and drafted the final term sheet. I didn't send it to the board. I sent it directly to Barton's personal email. The offer was simple. Lumenvale would acquire 100% of Ashford Horizon shares at $24 a share. It was a fair price, generous even, considering the fraud. It ensured the employees kept their jobs and the pension fund remained solvent. But there was a condition. Condition 5. The immediate resignation of Barton Ashford as CEO and chairman. No severance package, no golden parachute, no consultancy role, no retention of company assets, including the corporate jet, the Palm Beach estate owned by the trust, or the executive apartment in New York. He would leave with nothing but the cash for his shares, cash that would immediately be seized by the banks to pay off his personal debts. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was not a blocked number, it was his personal cell phone. I stared at the screen. The room was silent. Maya and Dahlia looked at me. I held up a hand, signaling them to stay quiet. I answered. "This is Ren Stone." "Ren," Barton's voice came through the line. It sounded ravaged. The deep, booming baritone was gone, replaced by a rasp that sounded like gravel grinding together. "Ren, we need to talk." "I am listening," I said. "I received your term sheet," he said. He paused, and I could hear the sound of ice clinking in a glass. He was drinking. It is harsh. Ren, very harsh." "It is fair, Barton," I said. "It is the market price." "It leaves me with nothing," he said, his voice rising slightly. A flicker of the old anger. "No severance? After 30 years? I built this company. I built the grid that powers this state. You can't just throw me out on the street." "You are not going to the street, Barton," I said coldly. "You are going to face the consequences of your own leverage. You borrowed against your own stock. That is not my fault." "I can fight this," he said, but the threat was hollow. "I can drag this out in court for years. I can burn the cash reserves until there is nothing left for you to buy." "No, you can't," I said. "The banks have frozen your operating accounts. The judge denied your TRO, your lawyer resigned, and your son has publicly disavowed you. You have no cards left." Silence stretched over the line. Long, heavy silence. Then, the tone changed. It shifted from anger to something far more pathetic. It shifted to bargaining. "Ren," he said, and his voice went soft. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot. The dinner, I was stressed. I was under pressure. I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," I said. "We are family," he pleaded. "Caleb loves you. I am his father. Doesn't that mean anything? You are going to be my daughter-in-law. Do you really want to start a marriage by destroying your husband's father? Think about the tradition. Think about the holidays. We can work something out. Give me an advisory role. Let me keep the estate. Let me save face." He was invoking the very things he had used to humiliate me: tradition, lineage, the sanctity of the Ashford table. "Barton," I said, "do you remember what you told me at the dinner? You said I didn't belong at the table because I didn't bring value." "I was wrong," he rushed to say. "Clearly, you have value. You are brilliant. I see that now." "It is not about brilliance," I said. "It is about responsibility. You used the company as your personal piggy bank. You risked the pensions of 4,000 workers to pay for your lifestyle. You risked the stability of the grid to save your stock options." I stood up and walked to the window. "I don't care about your tradition," I said, my voice hard as diamond. "I don't care about your lineage. I don't care about the awkwardness at Thanksgiving dinner. I care about the payroll of the people who actually do the work. I care about the integrity of the system. Ren, please, he whispered. It was the sound of a man who had never begged for anything in his life and didn't know how to do it without sounding broken. Don't humiliate me like this. I am not humiliating you, I said. I am just processing the transaction. You sold your integrity a long time ago. Barton, I am just closing the account. You are a cold bitch, he spat, the mask slipping one last time. I am the CEO, I replied, and you are trespassing on my property. I hung up. I stood there for a moment, listening to the dial tone in my head. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The anger was gone. The need for revenge was gone. All that was left was the work. He is done, I said to Dahlia. Did he agree? She asked. He didn't have to, I said. The shareholder vote is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We have the votes. We have the debt. We have the board. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of logistics. We finalized the integration plans. We prepared the press releases. We set up the transition teams. Thursday night turned into Friday morning. The sun rose over the city, indifferent to the fall of a dynasty. At 8:30 in the morning, I walked into the Ashford Horizon building. This time, I didn't go to the visitor desk. I walked straight to the elevators. The security guards, who had read the memo about the protected status of the workforce, nodded at me. One of them even held the door. I rode the elevator up to the top floor. The boardroom was waiting. The room was full. The directors were there. The lawyers were there. The representatives from the banks were there. And at the head of the table, one last time, sat Barton Ashford. He looked 10 years older than he had on Monday. His suit hung loosely on his frame. His face was gray. He was staring at a blank notepad. He looked up when I entered. There was no shouting this time. No security guards called to throw me out. No speeches about trash and treasure. He looked at me, and he saw the inevitable. He saw the woman who had taken his insult, forged it into a weapon, and used it to conquer his world. He stood up. It was a slow, painful movement. He didn't speak to me. He didn't look at the board. He simply gathered his pen and his glasses. He knew what was coming. The vote was a formality. The king was dead. I walked to the other end of the table and placed my hands on the leather chair, the chair opposite him. "Shall we begin?" I asked. Barton looked at me one last time. There was hate in his eyes. Yes, but there was also fear. The fear of a man who realizes, too late, that he was never the giant he thought he was. He was just a man standing in the way of the future, and the future had just walked in the door. The vote was not dramatic. It did not have the cinematic flair of a shouting match or the adrenaline of a last-second objection. It was quiet, bureaucratic, and absolutely lethal. The corporate secretary, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who had served 3 generations of Ashfords, stood at the head of the room. She held a tablet in her hands. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that covered the sound of nervous breathing from the board members. "The motion on the table," Mrs. Higgins read, her voice devoid of emotion, "is the acceptance of the tender offer from Lumenvale Systems to acquire 100% of the outstanding shares of Ashford Horizon Energy at a price of $24 per share, subject to the restructuring conditions outlined in the term sheet." She looked up. "All in favor?" One by one, the hands went up. Director Holloway, Mrs. Vance, the representatives from the pension funds, the independent directors who, just 48 hours ago, had been terrified of crossing Barton. They raised their hands, not because they liked me, but because the math left them no choice. I was the only path that didn't lead to a federal investigation and a bankruptcy court. "The motion carries unanimously," Mrs. Higgins stated. She tapped the screen, recording the end of an era. Barton Ashford sat frozen. He was staring at the show of hands as if witnessing a natural disaster. He had spent 30 years building a wall of loyalty around himself, bought with favors and fear. In 10 seconds, that wall had evaporated. "This is a mistake," Barton whispered. It was the first time he had spoken since the meeting began. "You are handing a legacy over to a technician. We are handing the company over to a solvent operator, Mr. Ashford." "Mrs." Vance said gently but firmly. "It is done." Dahlia Mercer stepped forward. She placed a single document on the mahogany table in front of Barton. Beside it, she placed a heavy silver fountain pen. "This is the resignation agreement. Mr. Ashford," Dahlia said. "As per the terms of the acquisition. It is effective immediately upon signature." Barton looked at the paper. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, a friendly face, anyone who would step in and stop the bleeding. But the directors were already packing their briefcases. They were avoiding his gaze. They had survived. He had not. Barton's posture shifted. He straightened his tie, trying to summon the ghost of his former authority. He looked at me. "Fine," he said, his voice gaining a little strength. "I will sign, but we need to discuss the transition. I expect to be named Chairman Emeritus. I want an office on the executive floor, a consultancy fee of $2 million a year for 5 years. It is standard for a retiring CEO of my stature. It preserves confidence in the market." He was bargaining. He was trying to salvage a title, a shred of relevance to wear at the country club. He still thought this was a negotiation. I shook my head slowly. "No title, Barton," I said. "No office, no fee." "You can't be serious," Barton snapped. "I am the face of this company. You need me to soothe the regulators." "The regulators are currently reviewing a file provided by a whistleblower in your internal audit department," Dahlia interjected smoothly. "They are very interested in the accounting regarding the Georgia contracts." Barton went pale. The air seemed to leave his lungs. "We have not sent the full, unredacted file to the Department of Justice yet." Dahlia continued, leaning in close. "We are holding it in reserve. If you sign this document, which stipulates a clean break, no severance, and a permanent ban from the premises, we will consider the internal investigation closed upon your departure. We will handle the restatement of earnings quietly." Dahlia paused, letting the weight of the threat settle on his shoulders. "If you insist on an advisory role," she said, "we will have no choice but to hand the full file to the federal prosecutor to limit our own liability. You won't be an advisor. Barton, you will be a defendant." Barton looked at the document. He looked at Dahlia. Then he looked at me. The realization washed over him. He wasn't just losing his job. He was being offered a plea deal. His hands were shaking. He reached for the pen, but his fingers fumbled. He looked old. The granite facade had crumbled into dust. I walked around the table. I stood right next to him. The smell of his expensive cologne, which used to fill the room with intimidation, now just smelled like stale alcohol and desperation. I reached out and picked up the pen. I held it out to him. "You told me once that I didn't belong at the table," I said quietly. My voice wasn't triumphant. It was just a statement of fact, as cold and hard as the glass walls of my laboratory. "You said I was trash. You said I diluted the quality of the room." Barton looked up at me, his eyes wet with humiliation. "Wren," he started, his voice cracking. "Take the pen. Barton," I said. "You were right. One of us didn't belong at this table. But it wasn't me." I placed the pen in his hand. "Now," I said, "you don't belong to this company." He gripped the pen. He looked at the signature line. For a second, I thought he might throw it. I thought he might scream, but he didn't. He was a man who understood leverage, and for the first time in his life, he had none. He signed. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the only sound in the room. It was over. Barton stood up. He left the pen on the document. He didn't say goodbye to the board. He didn't look at Caleb, who was standing at the back of the room. He walked to the door, his steps heavy and uneven. When the door clicked shut behind him, the room seemed to exhale. The tension broke. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. "File the 8K with the SEC," I instructed, "and release the press statement." The press release went out at noon. The headline was simple: Lumenvale Systems completes acquisition of Ashford Horizon Energy. Ren Stone. Named executive chair, the market reacted with cautious optimism. The stock ticked up 2%, but the real reaction came from the ground. At 2 o'clock, I went down to the main auditorium. It was packed. Not with investors, but with employees. Linemen in orange vests, engineers in hard hats, administrative staff who had been terrified of losing their pensions. I stood on the stage. I didn't wear a suit. I had taken off the jacket and rolled up the sleeves of my shirt. "My name is Ren Stone," I said into the microphone. "And I work for you." I announced the retention of the pension fund. I announced the green transition plan. I saw the relief on their faces. Men and women who had spent years watching their company be looted by executive greed, now realizing that the new boss actually cared about the product. In the back of the room, leaning against the wall, was Caleb. He wasn't on stage. He wasn't wearing a vice president badge. He was wearing a lanyard that identified him as a project manager, Renewable Integration Division. After the speech, I found him in the lobby. He was talking to a group of solar technicians, holding a tablet, taking notes. He looked different, lighter. "How does it feel?" I asked, walking up to him. "It feels like work," Caleb said, smiling. "Real work. I have to report to the regional director in Arizona on Monday. He told me if I'm late, he will write me up." "He will," I warned. "He is a stickler for punctuality." "Good," Caleb said. "I am tired of being the prince. Ren, I just want to be useful." He looked at me with a respect that went deeper than romance. We weren't a couple anymore. That bridge had burned the night of the dinner. But we were colleagues, and for the first time, that meant something. "You saved the house," he said. "I didn't save the house," I corrected. "I evicted the termite. Now we have to rebuild the foundation." 3 weeks later, I hosted my first official dinner as chairman. It was held in the same grand dining room at the Ashford estate, which was now technically a corporate asset used for functions. The mahogany table was the same. The chandelier was the same. But the guests were different. I hadn't invited the senators or the hedge fund managers. I hadn't invited the Palm Beach elite who measured people by their bloodlines. I had invited the top performers from the operational division. To my right sat a 60-year-old grid foreman named Mike, who had kept the power on during 3 hurricanes. To my left sat Nina Ward, the whistleblower, who was now the chief compliance officer. The servers brought out the first course. It wasn't caviar. It was steak and potatoes, solid and real. Mike looked around the room, clearly uncomfortable with the opulence. He looked at his fork, then at me. "Ms. Stone," he said, "I have worked for this company for 30 years. I have fixed the lines outside this gate. I never thought I would be sitting inside it." I raised my glass. "That is because the definition of who belongs has changed." "Mike," I said. I looked down the long table. There was no fear here. There was laughter. There was the sound of people discussing energy loads and battery efficiency. It was a table of value, not vanity. "To the people who do the work," I toasted. "To the work," they replied. As we ate, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security team at the gate. I glanced at the message. "Mr. Barton Ashford is at the service entrance. He requests access to the main house to collect his personal golf clubs from the storage locker." I typed a reply. "Grant access, service entrance only, escort required, do not allow entry to the main dining hall." I put the phone away. I could imagine him out there, the man who had sat at the head of this table for decades, the man who had treated people like furniture, was now walking through the back door, past the garbage cans and the delivery trucks. He would hear the laughter coming from the dining room. He would see the lights. But he would never sit here again. It wasn't cruel. It was symmetrical. He was experiencing the world he had created for everyone else. He was experiencing what it felt like to be on the outside, looking in at a feast you weren't invited to. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted excellent. People called it a revenge story. The press, the tabloids. even Caleb sometimes. They all framed it as a woman getting even. But as I looked around the room at the engineers and the workers, at the company that was finally solvent, finally honest, and finally safe, I knew the truth. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This was simply a correction. I had bought the asset. I had stripped out the inefficiency. I had replaced the obsolete management. Barton Ashford had called me trash. He had thought he could discard me, but in the end, he was the error in the code, and I was the update. I smiled at Nina Ward, who was laughing at a joke the foreman made. Trash is just matter out of place, I thought to myself. And now, everything is exactly where it belongs. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Ren Stone and her strategic dismantling of the Ashford Empire. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your country or city. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this corporate revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to the Emma Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to support the work, and smash the hype button so this video can be recommended to more people who love a good justice story. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next story.